The sea breeze mixed with the salty and wet smell swept from the dark deck. The huge body of the cruise ship Ocean Star quietly sailed away from the Hong Kong port in the middle of the night. The brightly lit hull was like a silver-scaled beast, swallowing up the hustle and bustle on the shore. In the party room on the top floor, champagne foam was still trembling on the rim of the crystal glass, the laughter of the rich was mixed with the aftertaste of the string quartet, and the air was filled with the sweet smoke of expensive perfume and cigars. Mu Xue rubbed her aching temples and squeezed out from the crowd. She was just an ordinary white-collar worker who got into this luxurious paradise by relying on the boat ticket drawn by the company. At this moment, all she wanted to do was return to her middle cabin and fall asleep. The corridor was dimly lit, and the carpet was so thick that it swallowed up the sound of footsteps. She walked swaying, with the mocking glances of the gorgeously dressed guests still echoing in her mind. How dare a young white-collar worker come to join in the fun? She gritted her teeth and suppressed the grievance in her heart, and pushed open a door marked Penthouse VIP Suite Area. She thought it was a shortcut to the elevator, but who knew that there was another deep passage behind the door? The rain beat against the porthole, making a crackling sound, like countless fine needles piercing the glass. She frowned and quickened her pace, but suddenly she smelled a pungent smell of rust, so strong that her stomach churned. In the room, a body lay across the top-grade mahogany floor. The rich man Li Hanyu, the Diamond King Laowu who spent money like water at the party, had a silver-handled fruit knife stuck in his chest at the moment, and his blood spread like ink, forming a sticky dark red lake. His eyes were wide open and he stared at the ceiling, the broken light of the crystal chandelier reflecting a strange glow in his pupils. The air was filled with the smell of blood and urine, mixing into a disgusting smell of decay. Mu Xue's legs went weak. She took a step back and bumped into the door frame. Her eyes swept across the floor involuntarily. From beside the body, a set of wet footprints were clearly visible. The soles had unique patterns, like twisted vines, winding toward the balcony. The edges of the footprints were still glistening with water droplets, reflecting the light, as if they had just stepped on a deck in the rain. The balcony door was closed tightly, and there was water mist on the glass. Outside was the dark sea, and the roar of waves hitting the hull of the ship was faintly heard. No one. There was no trace of escape. From the crack of a half-open door, blood came into view. Mu Xue's heart suddenly shrank. She opened the door and screamed, tearing apart the tranquility of the night. Ah! Mu Xue's scream echoed like an alarm bell, causing chaotic footsteps. At the end of the corridor, Captain Qiao Zhixia was the first to rush in. He was in his early 50s, with a full head of white hair, and his uniform was stiff but soaked with sweat. Damn it! What's going on? He growled, his eyes locked on the corpse, his face instantly turned as white as paper, and the walkie-talkie in his hand fell down and hit the carpet with a muffled sound. Passengers gathered around after hearing the news. Some screamed and some retched. A lady in evening dress covered her mouth and said in a trembling voice, "Mr. Li. He is dead? Where is the murderer? Murder on the ship? We are all finished." Panic spread like wildfire. Qiao Zhixia forced herself to dial the radio. Attention all on the ship. There has been a murder in the penthouse suite. All cabin doors are immediately blocked, and all entrances and exits are strictly prohibited. Repeat, ship closure investigation begins. His voice echoed through the loudspeaker, and the cruise ship suddenly fell into dead silence. Only the roar of the waves and the whispers of distant passengers were like ghostly whispers. On the deck, someone started smashing things, and people started crying. The murderer is on the ship. We are living targets. Mu Xue collapsed on the ground, holding her knees with her hands, tears mixed with cold sweat sliding down her face. She stared at the footprints, despair welling up in her heart. How did the murderer disappear? The balcony door didn't open, and the footprints stopped abruptly, like ghosts evaporating. At this moment, the crowd dispersed, and a figure quietly squeezed into the scene. A young woman, wrapped in a black windbreaker, her long hair glowing coldly under the light. Her name is Luo Li, a recognized, weird girl, on the ship. She lives alone on weekdays and specializes in boring footprint studies. When the passengers saw her coming, their already flustered faces became even more mocking. Is it Miss Luo again? A detective game where you pretend to be a ghost? A fat wealthy businessman curled his lips, his voice trembling but pretending to be calm. Captain, what does a little girl like this know? Hurry up and call the security to seal the scene, we have to protect ourselves. Ye Zhi wiped the cold sweat from her forehead, glanced at Luo Li, and said in a tired tone, Miss Luo, this is too difficult. The police are still at sea and can't wait. There are 500 people on the ship, and everyone is a suspect. His eyes were covered with red threads, and his hands were shaking slightly, as if he had foreseen the tragedy of the riot on the ship. Mu Xue looked up and saw Luo Li ignoring everyone and slowly squatting down, the hem of his windbreaker brushing the edge of the pool of blood. She put on her gloves, and the tip of her nose was almost close to the footprints. The drizzle seeped in from the gaps in the balcony, and the water droplets around the footprints were still slowly seeping out, giving off a faint smell of sea salt. Passengers around snickered. Look at her virtue, she smells like a dog. It's just footprints. The murderer has already flown away, right? The lady agreed with a sharp voice. Yes, maybe Mr. Li made a mistake himself. Who knows how much debt he owes? Luo Li turned a deaf ear and lightly touched the pattern on the edge of the footprints with her fingertips. They were rare Italian handmade leather soles with tiny abrasions between the vine lines. There was a small crack on the left heel, as if it had been left by long-term stepping on rough decking. She whispered, the humidity level, the depth of the rainwater penetrated 0.3 centimeters into the pattern. The murderer left the body within 10 minutes, walked ashore from the deck, and ran straight to this place. Shoe size 42, male, center of gravity to the left, habitually 8 steps inward. Her voice was as calm as ice, but Ye Zhi's pupils shrank suddenly. You, how do you know? The captain's Adam's apple rolled, and his voice actually trembled. He leaned over and looked, and sure enough, the heel of the footprints was slightly tilted, and rainwater gathered along the cracks. Luo Li stood up and glanced at the balcony door. The door has not been moved, no fingerprints, no scratches. The murderer came here with footprints, and then disappeared. She paused, and everyone gasped. The fat rich businessman's face was frozen with ridicule, and his mouth was as wide as a carp starving for oxygen. Mu Xue's heartbeat accelerated. This woman, what did she understand? Impossible. A ghost, the lady screamed, her legs weakened, and she slid down against the wall. The other passengers looked at each other, fear rising like a tide. Luo Li turned to Mu Xue, her eyes as sharp as knives. You found the body, the first witness. Tell me the exact time you pushed the door open. Mu Xue stuttered. The party ended at 11:30. I got lost. I opened the door at about 11:45. Her voice was as thin as a mosquito's chirping, and her hands were cold. Luo Li nodded and squatted back to the footprints. This time, her eyes locked on the outermost edge of the footprints, a trace of unknown liquid, thick and translucent, not as clear as rain, but with a faint bitter smell of almonds. The surrounding air seemed to freeze. Ye Zhi came closer, her nose twitching. What is this? Blood? No. The corners of Luo Li's lips were slightly raised, but there was no trace of joy. Cyanide remains. The murderer not only used a knife, but also tried to cover up another secret. She straightened up, everyone's eyes widened, and the fat rich businessman's ridicule had already turned into a terrified gasp. How did she smell it? Oh my God, this girl is a monster. The ship's horn sounded again, and Qiao Zhixia's voice was filled with tears. Everyone stay in the cabin. Miss Luo, please, can these footprints really lock the murderer? Luo Li didn't answer, just stared at the turbulent black waves outside the balcony. The sea wind howled, and the raindrops fell like bullets. The mystery of the sudden stop of the footprints is like an invisible noose, tightening everyone's throat. Mu Xue climbed up and followed Luo Li. An inexplicable hope surged in her heart, but she was swallowed up by a deeper chill. If the murderer could make the footprints disappear out of thin air, what kind of poisonous plot could the liquid? Point 2. The storm is approaching, the cruise ship is bumping on the waves, the cabin lights are swaying, and pairs of eyes are peering in the darkness, waiting for the next victim. Luo Li opened the balcony door, and seawater splashed in, mixed with distant thunder. She whispered to Mu Xue, "This is not the end. The footprints tell me that the murderer is among us. But the liquid, it hides clues to the second body." Mu Xue's pupils dilated, the ship's hull shook violently, and in the darkness, there seemed to be a thin sound of shoe soles rubbing, coming from deep in the corridor. Luo Li ignored the wind and rain and bent down to check the balcony floor. The rainwater gathered into a thin stream along the edge of the shoe prints, washing out a clearer vine pattern. She took out a magnifying glass from the inner pocket of her windbreaker. The silver-rimmed lenses reflected the cold light in the lightning. Under the mirror, the details of the footprints are as vivid as reliefs. The cracks on the left heel are as fine as spider silk. The depth of rainwater penetration is just 0.3 centimeters, and there is a trace of seaweed debris among the patterns. Limited edition, handmade in Italy, Aldo Rossi series, no more than 50 pairs in the world. Size 42, male, stayed on the deck for at least 20 minutes in the early morning. As soon as she finished speaking, Qiao Zhixia rushed out of the door. The rain wet his hair, his eyes widened, and he let out a growl in his throat. Voice, you can tell the brand from the footprints? Impossible. What happened to this girl? The captain's voice trembled like a candle in the wind. Among the passengers rushing around, the fat rich businessman rubbed his eyes and murmured, "Monster, she is a monster, right?" Mu Xue's heart was pounding. She leaned closer to Luo Li and whispered, I heard it. There was a quarrel at the end of the corridor and on the balcony before the body was found. Men's, low-pitched, as if they were talking about money. Mr. Li said, "It is only natural to pay back debts," and another voice sneered and said, "Settled tonight." Her memories were like ice needles piercing her face, and her face was as pale as paper. Luo Li nodded, put away the magnifying glass, turned around and opened the storm door. "Come in. Captain, gather the passenger list, and everyone will provide a preliminary comparison of shoes. Exclude the crew first." Qiao Zhixia was stunned, and the rainwater fell down the bridge of her nose. He opened his mouth to refute, but saw Luo Li's eyes as sharp as a knife, swallowing the words abruptly. Okay, I'll be right away. But with 500 people, this is going to be chaotic. He dialed the intercom and said in a hoarse voice, all crew members gathered in the middle-level conference hall, and passengers went to the top floor in batches to wait for shoeprint inspection. Repeat, cooperate with the investigation, and violators will be placed under house arrest. In the room, the smell of blood had been diluted by the sea breeze, but it added a rotten sweetness. Li Hanyu's body was still lying on the ground. Blood beads were condensed on the handle of the fruit knife, dripping slowly, and the clicking sound was like a countdown. The passengers took a step back, and the lady covered her nose and retched, "That's disgusting." "Shoe prints? Can this identify the murderer? Captain, do you believe this little girl?" The ridicule came like a flood, and the fat rich businessman echoed, "Yes, maybe she stepped on it herself." "Why are you pretending to be a detective?" Luo Li turned a deaf ear and opened the mahogany drawer next to the body, and the wood made a sharp squeaking sound. Inside, a stack of debt documents were scattered, stained with ink, 30 million owed to Fu Hen Group, and a triangular debt chain, pointing to many wealthy people on the ship. Underneath, there was a love letter. The paper was crumpled and the handwriting was scrawled, "See you on the balcony in the summer night, don't let her know our secret. Li." The smell of perfume, strong rose mixed with blood, made Mu Xue frown. "Who is this?" pointing to Ye Zhi. "She and Mr. Li are very close." Luo Li picked up the love letter and sniffed it lightly with the tip of her nose. "Ye Zhi's brand, Chanel, is not .5. But the ink is new, and it was written tonight." The victim made an appointment on the balcony, and the debt dispute was compounded by love murder. Before she could finish her words, there were cluttered steps outside the door, and the first batch of passengers were escorted by the crew. The lights in the corridor flickered, reflecting the horrified and twisted faces of everyone. Some people were sobbing, and some were yelling, "Take off your shoes in the middle of the night? Abnormal." Qiao Zhixia wiped her sweat and commanded, "Come one by one, step on the white paper." Luo Li squatted in the makeshift comparison area, scanning the pairs of footprints with a magnifying glass. Women's high heels were useless, the crew's rubber soles were rough and inconsistent, and ordinary leather shoes had monotonous patterns. The passengers snickered. "Look, her hard work was in vain. The murderer has been hiding for a long time." When the lady took off her shoes, she deliberately threw them at Luo Li. The heel of the shoe grazed the back of her hand. "Little girl, don't touch me." Mu Xue bit her lip to help pass the paper. Her mind was swaying like the hull of a ship, her admiration for Luo Li mixed with fear. This woman was so terrifying, she seemed to be able to see through the soul. Suddenly, the crowd parted, and a stern man walked in. Fu Han, the victim's business partner, in his early 40s, wearing a neat suit, black hair combed sleekly, and eyes like a falcon. His shoes were polished to a shine, but there was a faint sheen of moisture, and the smell of sea water was tangy to his nostrils. "Captain, I have an alibi." Drinking in the bar after the party, 10 witnesses. His voice was as low as the undercurrent of the ocean floor, and the passengers around him gasped, "Mr. Fu? The whole ship knows that Mr. Li owes you money." Qiao Zhixia nodded. "Mr. Fu, check first." Fu Hen glanced at Luo Li, his eyes flashed with an imperceptible gloom, like clouds covering the moon. Luo Li stood up and locked her eyes on his shoes. "Aldo Rossi, size 42. Please step on the paper." Fu Han's lips twitched slightly, but he cooperated in taking off his shoes. On the paper, patterns pop out, twisted vines, thin cracks on the left heel, and the center of gravity is to the left. The remnants of rainwater have not yet dried, and the bitter taste of almonds is faintly wafting out. Qiao Zhixia's eyes were as wide as copper bells, and the list in her hand fell to the ground. "It's a perfect match." "Mr. Fu, your shoes." The passengers broke out in a commotion, and the fat rich businessman pointed at Fu Han and trembled. "The murderer. It's him. Murder for debt." The lady screamed and backed away, knocked over the chair, and fell to the ground. Mu Xue's heartbeat stopped, and she clutched Luo Li's sleeve. "Miss Luo, he is the owner of that footprint." Fu Han's face turned livid, and his fists clenched slightly. Ridiculous. There are 50 pairs of shoes in the world, how can I prove that it's not a coincidence? The sea breeze rushed towards her face like a wild beast, and the cold marbles mixed with the heavy rain hit Luo Li's cheek. She narrowed her eyes, and her windbreaker was torn by the strong wind. Outside the balcony, black waves rolled like ink boiling. The hull of the cruise ship, Star of the Sea, bumped violently in the trough of the waves, making a low groan of twisted metal. Mu Xue clung to the railing, her knuckles turning white, her stomach churning. She gasped, "The second corpse? Miss Luo, don't scare me, there's enough chaos on this ship." Her voice was swallowed up by thunder, and the whispers of the passengers around her flickered like will-o'-the-wisps. Some people cursed, "Crazy woman, don't curse us." At this moment, a shrill cry from outside the door tore through the air. "No. It's not Mr. Fu. I hid it." Ye Zhi rushed in. Her evening dress was messy and her makeup was gone like a ghost. She threw herself at the body, hugged her knees and cried bitterly, "Mr. Li invited me to the balcony, but someone came first. I heard 2 male voices. Det, and her, that woman." Her finger pointed to the dark corridor. Her voice was trembling and intermittent, and tears mixed with blood fell down. Everyone gasped, and the fat rich businessman's legs went weak, and he murmured, "Is there anyone else? Miss Yi, what are you hiding?" Luo Li's pupils shrank, and she turned to Ye Zhi. "Tell me clearly. Who is she?" "The secret in the love letter." Ye Zhi choked and avoided her eyes. In the roaring sea wind, the ship swayed again, and the light suddenly went out for a moment. When it came back on, the sound of shoe soles rubbing deep in the corridor sounded again, closer, closer. Mu Xue's back felt cold, and she stared at Luo Li closely. "Miss Luo, Fu Han's shoe prints match, but Ye Zhi, she knows about the second body?" Luo Li didn't answer, just squeezed the magnifying glass tightly, and her eyes swept over Fu Han's wet shoes and Ye Zhi's trembling legs like an eagle. At the edge of the pool of blood, cyanide fluid spread slowly, and the smell of almonds was strong and pungent, as if foretelling the next death. "The storm has arrived, and the waves hit the deck like shells." The lights of the cruise ship swayed, and the passengers trembled together. Someone whispered, "Luo Li, can she really solve the case? There are ghosts on the ship, and we won't survive tonight." Qiao Zhixia grabbed the walkie-talkie, extended house arrest. "Fu Han, Ye Zhi, lock them all up." But Luo Li shook his head. "Wait. The shoe prints are the key, but the disappearing footsteps point to the substitute." Her words exploded like thunder. Fu Han's face turned pale, Ye Zhi's cry stopped, and the whole place was dead silent, leaving only the roar of the waves and the beating of the heart. The investigation continued, and the second group of passengers filed in, their shoe prints spread out one after another like a map of death. Luo Li's fingertips were flying. During the comparison, she whispered to Mu Xue, "There is forged handwriting on the back of the debt document. The money Fu Han owes Mr. Li is the truth." Mu Xue's eyes widened. "How do you?" The corners of Luo Li's lips raised slightly. "It takes 15 minutes for the ink to dry. The love letter is the bait." Among the passengers, there was an old man. When taking off his shoes, the footprints were slightly similar, but Luo Li dismissed them with a glance. "The right foot is not cracked, the pattern is rough. Rule it out." The old man was relieved, but his legs were soft and he sat on the ground. "Oh my God, her eyes are microscopes?" The ridicule had long since evaporated, replaced by an awe-inspiring whisper, and the lady's bitterness turned into trembling. "Miss Luo, save us." When Fu Han was escorted away by the crew, his eyes flashed sinisterly, and his shoes left a wet mark on the floor, leading directly to the door. Ye Zhi was helped up and murmured, "That woman, she is waiting for Mr. Li on the deck." Her words were like hooks, and Luo Li turned around. "Who?" Ye Zhi bit her lip. No, don't ask." Mu Xue froze, and her face suddenly changed. The surrounding air solidified, the smell of blood and almond bitterness intertwined, thunder rumbled, and the lights flickered, the footprints on the balcony seemed to come alive, and the vine patterns squirmed like snakes. Luo Li opened the door and went out again. The sea rain poured down, and she whispered, "The second body is below the deck." The ship's hull shook violently, and in the darkness, multiple footsteps gathered together, like a pack of wolves approaching. The lights in the corridor flickered like will-o'-the-wisps, and the heavy rain pattered against the portholes like countless bullets. The shoe print comparison area has become a makeshift battlefield, with white paper covering the carpet, wet shoes leaving puddles of water stains, and a pungent stench mixed with blood and bitter almonds. Passengers huddled together, the smell of sweat and fear filled the air. Some people pushed and cursed, "It's my turn? What does this little girl know? It's a waste of time." The fat wealthy businessman put his hands on his hips and mocked. His voice was like a pig's snort. "So what if Mr. Fu's shoes match? Can she identify the murderer? There are 500 people on the ship, and the murderer has jumped into the sea to feed the sharks." The ladies whispered, looking at Luo Li like knives, "She is pretending to be a ghost, maybe she is with the murderer." Luo Li knelt down, turning the magnifying glass between her fingers like a scalpel, ignoring the sarcasm around her. She scanned the footprints of the third group of passengers. A young waiter's rubber-soled shoes were rough and scratchy, and an old woman's flat cloth shoes were dry and without traces of moisture. Her voice was as calm as ice. "Excluded. Next one." The passengers burst into laughter, and some people threw their shoes to the ground. "Look, it's all in vain. The ship is going to sink and we are still playing around." Mu Xue gritted her teeth and stood beside her, her hand handing the paper trembling slightly. She whispered to Luo Li, "They don't believe you, but I do. Fu Han's shoes are so similar." Luo Li did not raise her head. Her pupils reflected the vine patterns on the paper. It's up to them to believe it or not. The truth doesn't matter. The crew roughly pushed the crowd away, and Fu Han was escorted back again. His handcuffs shone coldly in the light, his suit was wrinkled, and the smell of seawater was still clinging to the soles of his shoes. Qiao Zhixia wiped the sweat from her forehead and said with a trembling voice, "Mr. Fu, let's compete again. Miss Luo insists." Fu Han smiled, and his eyes swept over Luo Li like a poisonous snake. "Little girl, there are 50 pairs in the world, do you dare to testify against me?" He took off his shoes and said heavily, "When you step on it, the white paper gets soaked, and twisted patterns appear, vines are entangled, cracks on the left heel are like spider webs, seaweed debris is stuck in the groove, the depth is 0.3 centimeters, the center of gravity is 8 steps to the left, a perfect match for more than 98% of the on-site balcony footprints." There was a moment of dead silence, and then a thunderous uproar broke out. Luo Li squatted down to compare. Under a magnifying glass, the pattern match was 98%, the cracks were in exactly the same position, and the seaweed debris was like solid evidence. She whispered, "Not only the shoe prints, but your eyes averted 3 times, the first time when you saw cyanide, the second time on the drawer-det note, and the third time on the balcony door. You were on the deck in the early morning." Fu Han's Adam's apple rolled, and the veins on his forehead bulged. The ridicule of the passengers around him turned into fear and admiration. She can even see it in her eyes? Mr. Fu is finished. Qiao Zhixia fell to her knees and leaned over. "Miss Luo, irrefutable proof. Put him under house arrest." The captain's voice was crying, and his hands were shaking like chaff. Mu Xue's heart was beating like a war drum. She took a step forward and bravely stared at Fu Han's eagle eyes. "Mr. Fu, Mr. Li owes you 30 million, and the whole ship knows it. In the corridor in the early morning, I heard an argument, pay back the debt, settle it tonight. I recognize your sneer." Although her voice trembled, it cut through the air like a blade, and the passengers around her shivered. Angry, the fat wealthy businessman murmured, "This white-collar girl is brave, did she hear it?" Fu Han's veins popped out in his fists, and his Adam's apple rolled. "The debt is real, but murder? Ridiculous. I was smoking on the deck, all recorded, 10 witnesses." He turned to Qiao Zhixia, his voice as low as a whirlpool on the sea floor. "Captain, let me watch the video to prove my innocence." Qiao Zhixia was stunned. The passengers were buzzing and talking, and someone yelled, "Liar! There are shoe prints there." The ridicule flooded towards Fu Han, but Luo Li stood up slowly, pointed the magnifying glass at the footprints on the paper, and sniffed the bitter moisture mixed with seaweed and almonds with the tip of her nose. She tapped the edge of the shoe print with her fingers, and her voice was calm but thunderous. "The match is true, but the depth is uneven. The first 5 steps are 0.2 centimeters shallow, the last 3 steps are 0.5 centimeters deep, and the center of gravity is tilted forward 15 degrees. The murderer escaped with a heavy load, at least 20 kilograms, carried in his right hand." "Mr. Fu Han, you have a lean body. The deck monitors you smoking with your bare hands in the early morning. Your gait is even and balanced." After she finished speaking, the scene seemed to be frozen. Fu Han's face suddenly turned green and the corners of his lips twitched. You can see the weight from the depth." "Impossible. Damn it. It's him." The fat rich businessman's face turned red as he pointed at Fu Han, his hand shaking like a sieve, and his voice breaking and shrill. Passengers around him backed away, knocked over chairs and fell to the ground. Someone screamed, "Murderer! Murder for debt, Mr. Fu, you are finished." The noble lady covered her mouth and retched, and her legs slid softly as she sat down. "The shoe prints are exactly the same. Blood debt must be paid with blood." Qiao Zhixia's eyes widened like bells, and the walkie-talkie fell to the ground. He rushed forward and grabbed Fu Han's sleeves. "Iron proof. Mr. Fu, you, explain." The captain's voice was crying, and his knees softened and he knelt down, his face as white as a corpse. The wind and waves suddenly rose outside the door, the cruise ship shook like a drunkard, the waves hit the deck and roared like cannons, water dropped from the portholes, and the lights flashed 3 times and almost went out. The passengers screamed in panic and rolled to the ground. Someone peed their pants and the smell filled their nostrils. The boat is about to capsize. The murderer is still here, it's over. Qiao Zhixia got up, grabbed the intercom and yelled, "Detain Fu Han. Increased house arrest, lock the iron door." The crew dragged Fu Han out, and he struggled with eyes as sinister as a wolf. "Little girl, you will regret it. I didn't kill anyone, but someone wants me to take the blame." The shackles scraped the floor, leaving a wet trail leading straight to the dark corridor. Ye Zhi suddenly rushed out from the corner. Her evening dress was torn and exposed to the shoulders, and her makeup was stained like ghost tears. She threw herself at Luo Li's feet, her knees banging on the ground, hugging her head and crying, "Stop. It's not Mr. Fu. I hid it. Mr. Li asked me to go to the balcony, but there was an argument first. 2 men talked about debts, and then a woman screamed, 'You ruined me.' She pushed Mr. Li, and I saw a black shadow." Her voice was broken like broken glass, tears mixed with blood dripping, and she pointed in the direction of Mu Xue and then stopped. The audience gasped, and the fat wealthy businessman sat on the ground with weak legs. Mysterious woman? Miss Ye, who are you talking about? Ye Zhi bit her lip and shook her head, curled up and trembling. You can't say, she will kill me. Mu Xue's face turned pale, and her back felt as cold as ice when she touched it. The passengers roared in shock, and the fat wealthy businessman rubbed his eyes and backed away, muttering, "Monster, her eyes are energy gauges?" The lady's scream turned into trembling worship. Miss Luo, God! Mr. Fu has the right shoes, but the wrong person. Qiao Zhixia bent down like a kneeling, grabbing Luo Li's windbreaker with trembling hands. Miss Luo, you saved the ship. Stand in? Who borrowed Mr. Fu's shoes to kill people? His voice was like a candle in the wind, and his face was covered with tears and sweat. Mu Xue's eyes lit up with admiration, and she grabbed Luo Li's arm. Miss Luo, you are so powerful, the depth is uneven, why didn't I think about it? The whispers around her turned to awe. She is the god of detectives, the ghosts on the ship are afraid of her. The crowd dispersed. Luo Li Mu Xue retreated into a dark corner, the sea breeze howled in, and the windbreaker hunted. The light flickered, reflecting her face like a jade sculpture, and she whispered, "The footprints lead to the balcony where there is no one, and the depth is heavy, the murderer hides in the cracks of the hull, the maintenance channel or the cargo hold." Fu Han's shoes were borrowed, and the stand-in pointed at the debtor. Mr. Li forged the IOU, and the truth was that he blackmailed Fu Han. Love triangle plus cyanide, the second the corpse is below the deck, the poisoned person. Mu Xue's eyes widened, her heart beating like a deer. Miss Luo, why are you always a prophet? There are people hiding in the hull, and us? Luo Li's lips slightly raised, her eyes swept into the darkness. Keep an eye on Ye Zhi's eyes, she pointed at you 3 times. Be careful. Mu Xue froze, and a chill ran down her spine. The clock struck faintly at midnight, the cruise ship's engine roared like an animal's breath, and the heavy rain whipped against the deck. Mu Xue returned to the cabin alone, the door lock clicked and her heart was pounding. She took off her shoes and went to bed. The lights were turned off and darkness swallowed her, leaving only the roar of the waves hitting the hull. Suddenly, there was a light knock on the door, knock, 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 like the tapping of finger bones. Mu Xue bounced up, dripping with cold sweat. Who? There was no response, and the knocking became more urgent. She turned on the light with trembling hands, but there was no one outside the door. There was only a pair of wet shoes lying under the door curtain, Aldo Rossi, with arabesque patterns, cracks on the left heel, the seaweed was not dry, and the bitter smell of almonds wafted in. The inside of the shoes was stained with blood, as if they had just stepped on a corpse. Luo Li pulled Ye Zhi up, her eyes like knives piercing her heart. Tell me. Then knew she is Chanel No. 5, waiting for Mr. Li on the deck? Ye Zhi choked and nodded, but gritted his teeth. Qiao Zhixia waved her hand, put her under house arrest. Lock her up. The ship shook again, rainwater poured into the cracks of the door, cyanide spread around the edge of the pool of blood, and the bitter smell of almonds was so strong that it choked her nose, as if heralding a countdown to death. The passengers ran away holding their heads, and the lady cried, "Ms. Luo, help, the female murderer? Is there someone hiding in the hull?" Mu Xue's scream tore through the night sky, she retreated and knocked over the lampstand, the glass shattering like ice rain. The sound of footsteps went away into the corridor, which was about 8 steps away. She rushed to the door to pick up her shoes, her hands shaking like leaves. "Miss Luo, the murderer is targeting me." The ship shook violently, thunder exploded, and in the darkness, shoe prints slowly formed on the carpet outside the door, and the vines writhed like living snakes, pointing straight to the heart of her door. In the distance, the premonition of the second corpse is approaching like a ghost, blood, and wind and rain are intertwined. The cruise ship has been reduced to a sea grave, and Luo Li's shadow flashes in his mind, she, the only savior. At the end of the corridor, Luo Li walked towards her in a windbreaker. The sea breeze poured through the door and rolled up her hair. Her face was as pale as jade under the moon. She snatched the shoes, holding the magnifying glass in her palm. Her pupils reflected the seaweed debris and cracks in the grooves of the soles. Mu Xue, don't touch it. The blood is fresh, within 2 hours. Her voice was as calm as dead water, but it made Mu Xue's heart warm. The surrounding cabin doors creaked open, passengers peeked out to steal, and the fat rich businessman rushed out wrapped in a bathrobe, his fat face contorted. Again? Little girl detective, you have been comparing shoe prints for a long time, and the murderer even gave you shoes for fun? Ship ghost? The lady agreed sharply, with the smell of perfume mixed with fear and sweat. Who did this girl Mu Xue offend? Luo Li, can you do it? The whole ship is laughing. Luo Li ignored the sarcasm, squatted down to sweep the shoe prints, and sniffed lightly with the tip of her nose. The salty sea water was covered with blood and rust, and it was not as astringent as the rain. She slid her fingers along the marks and said in a low voice, 8 steps inside, the center of gravity is tilted forward, and the weight mark is heavier, 30 kilograms. The murderer carried the body or an instrument. The shoes are Fuhan style, but the linings are worn differently, and the soles of the feet are 0.2 centimeters wider. The passengers burst into laughter. Someone slammed the door. Monster reasoning. Will the shoes make you run longer? Where is Captain Kiao? House arrest is in vain. Mu Xue bit her lip and grabbed Luo Li's sleeve. Miss Luo, they said you. Luo Li stood up, her eyes like daggers. Let them laugh. The truth laughs last. Kiao Zhixia stumbled over, still holding the walkie-talkie in her hands, her face sallow with sweat pouring from her face. He knelt down by the porthole and made a wet sound with his knees on the carpet. Miss Luo. Mu Xue's door is imprinted with shoes. Fuhan is locked with iron. Ye Zhi. How did the murderer get the shoes? His voice was crying, and his eyes were as wide as seeing a ghost. The crew members backed up and hit the wall, their faces as white as paper. Luo Li handed the shoe to him. Seal it up. Call Ye Zhi for interrogation. She can't hide the clues about the love triangle. Kiao Zhixia got up, her legs were as weak as her face, and shouted to the crew, drag Ye Zhi here. Break the iron door open. The passengers buzzed and started talking. A little girl commanding the captain? What a fairy! The door of the house arrest room was smashed open, and Ye Zhi was curled up in the corner of the iron cage. Her evening dress was soaked and clinging to her body, revealing bruises and scratches. She raised her head to see Luo Li. Her pupils suddenly shrunk like prey. She screamed and backed into the iron railing. Don't touch me. That woman will kill me. Chanel number 5, she is on the boat. Luo Li took a step forward and put the magnifying glass on her face. Tell me. Li Hanyu's love triangle. Who is the third party? Love letters on the mahogany drawer, rose ink on the balcony. What are you hiding? Ye Zhi's throat was dry, tears bursting from the dam, and her voice was broken. Mr. Li, he is playing with us both. Vera and I. Vera is a mysterious passenger in first class, with the pseudonym Charlotte. The love letter was written by her to lure Mr. Li to talk about new debt settlement. She hates Mr. Li for destroying her family property. The 30 million is not Fuhan's, but Vera's. There was a dead silence. Kiao Zhixia held the table with trembling hands. Vera? There is this person in the first class? The surveillance blind spot. Miss Luo, How did you know about Xu Mo? His knees were weak, and he knelt down in admiration. Mu Xue's scream was like a sharp knife tearing through the rainy night, echoing in the narrow corridor, and the lights flickered and elongated her shadow into a ghost. The shoe prints outside the door were wet and winding, and the vine pattern twisted like a living snake on the red carpet. Each step turned to the left, and the bitter taste of almonds mixed with blood entered the nose, as thick as a poisonous mist. Her legs were weak and she knelt down, picking up the pair of Aldo Rossi with trembling hands. The inside of the shoes was sticky and stringy with blood, and felt as cold as dead skin to the touch. "Miss Luo, it's coming." Her voice broke into particles, and her tears fell on her shoes, diluting the blood stains into pink swirls. Luo Li turned around. The comparison of shoe prints continues. Half of the passengers on the ship, first-class cabins have priority. The comparison area was brightly lit, the heavy rain hit the portholes like thousands of arrows, and the water stains on the carpet spread blood red. Passengers lined up to take off their shoes, smelling like a steamer with the smell of sweat and fear. A bald-headed rich man shook his shoes and mocked, "My turn? Miss Luo, are you laser-eyed? Aren't you tired of thousands of footprints?" Luo Li knelt down to scan. The magnifying glass rotated like an electric drill, and her voice was mechanical. "Excluded. There are no vines on the rubber soles." The second lady twisted her waist. "My high heels, the murderer wears women's shoes?" Luo Li sniffed the liquid on the paper, and raised her eyebrows. "Seawater mixed blood stains, viscosity 0.8 newtons, rainwater 0.3. After the murder, the murderer stomped on the deck in a pool of blood. It was not raining indoors. The whole place was in an uproar. The bald rich man's fat face twitched. "Blood stains? Can she smell sea blood? A perverted genius." He stepped back and bumped into someone, his voice broken. "Miss Luo, spare your life, exclude me." Qiao Zhixia wiped her sweat and muttered. Half of it was eliminated, the evidence of sea blood, the ship's savior. His hands were shaking like sieves on the table, and tears of admiration shone. Mu Xue was ordered to search Li Hanu's suite. The door lock creaked when he pried it open. The edge of the pool of blood was dry and the almonds were bitter and pungent, and his heart was pounding like a drum. She flipped through the mahogany drawers, touched the rose scent of the love letter with trembling hands, and recorded on her mobile phone, "Vera, Charlotte, first class cabin C-17. The zipper of the suitcase clanked, and a debt contract appeared inside, Fu Han's signature of 30 million, the handwriting was skewed and forged, and there were pieces of carbon paper next to the check, the ink was as red as blood. "Mr. Li is blackmailing," Mu Xue whispered, sniffing the smell of counterfeit glue on the tip of her nose, and her legs almost fell. Passengers outside were peeping at the theft. A white-collar girl rummaging through corpses and luggage is so brave. Did she find a gold mine? Luo Li rushed to read the evidence and raised her lips slightly. Forged handwriting, tremor frequency 0.5 Hz, written by Li himself. Li blackmailed Fu Han, and the debt was transferred to Vera. Mu Xue's eyes widened. "Ms. Luo, do you think it's fake at first glance?" Luo Li nodded. "The tremor lines are uneven. Go to the detention room and ask Fu Han." The iron door of the house arrest room was thick. Fu Han sneered against the wall. His suit was wrinkled like a shroud, and the smell of sea water was still there. He raised his eyes and glanced at Luo Li, his voice like sharpening a knife. "Little girl, here you go again? I borrowed my shoes from someone. I knew it earlier." Li had a stand-in and an insurance fraud plan. He hired twin brothers to hide the corpses under the deck and wait for the storm to throw them into the sea, defrauding $500 million. Qiao Zhixia's face turned pale after hearing this, and she rushed forward to grab the railing. Mr. Fu, you, irrefutable evidence? Fu Hen smiled sinisterly. Monitor the blind deck, use my model's stand-in shoes, and escape from the maintenance channel with blood. Directed and acted by Li, the woman's shadow is the stand-in wife. His fist hit the iron railing, his eyes were as vicious as a wolf, and the crew members' hind legs were weak. Mr. Fu knows the inside story, it's amazing. But Miss Luo, do you believe it? Luo Li's eyes flashed with coldness. The stand-in said it was a heavy load, but the blood-stained sea water meant killing people on the deck, not on the balcony. She turned around, the wind and waves suddenly increased, the cruise ship rocked like a broken spine, the waves hit the deck with a thunderous roar, the water curtains poured through the portholes, the lights went out 3 times, the passengers screamed and hugged each other, and urine and blood mixed with the smell of hell. The boat has capsized. The murderer is hiding in the tunnel, spare your life. The fat wealthy businessman rolled to the ground and howled. Luo Li grabbed Qiao Zhixia and said, "Deck investigation. The balcony escape hatch, the murderer is familiar with the structure." Shaking like a leaf, Qiao Zhixia led the team to rush to the deck. The sea wind cut her face like a knife, the rain whipped her body and soaked her body, and the iron bars were bone-chilling. The deck was as dark as the abyss, and the waves were biting at the feet. Luo Li's flashlight scanned the hidden hatch under the balcony, which was half covered with rust. There are footprints left in the crack of the door, shallow imprints of vines, leaning forward to bear weight, and elongated sea blood sticky threads. Here! Her voice roared through the wind, and Qiao Zhixia rushed closer and stared. The footprints of the cabin door, the cargo hold. Miss Luo, your deduction is accurate. He hit his knees on the deck, and the rain mixed with tears. There is a murderer in the crew? Mu Xue followed closely, the cold wind chilled his bones, and his heartbeat was like a deer. Miss Luo, are you hiding a body? The passengers watched the theft from a distance, and the lady trembled. She found the ghost door on the deck. Detective Queen. Luo Li pried the cabin door creaking, and the dark and fishy wind was blowing inside. The flashlight illuminated a pair of women's shoes in the corner, Aldo Rossi women's model, with similar vine pattern, slightly cracked left heel, but size 41, 2 millimeters narrower. Ye Zhi. Luo Li whispered, sniffing the residual breath of almonds. Mu Xue's face turned pale. She? But the size doesn't match. She sneaked into my room late at night. Why? Luo Li stood up, her face as steel in the wind and rain. She pointed at you 3 times, borrowed the murderer's shoes, washed the blood and threw the door to scare you, covering up the love triangle. Vera is the real murderer? Or is it directed by Ye Zhi? Qiao Zhixia knelt down on the deck with weak legs, and the rain hit her back like a hammer. Miss Luo, there are ghosts inside the hull, the maze of the ship, and the second body is in the cargo hold? His voice trembled with admiration, and the crew gasped. Evidence of women's shoes. Ye Zhi sneaked in, divine reasoning. In the distance, from the direction of the cargo hold, there was a low roar like an animal's breath, accompanied by cyanide almonds drifting away. The waves hitting the ship's hull intensified and the roar intensified, and a faint figure flashed through the black crack of the hatch. Mu Xue grabbed Luo Li's arm. A chill ran down her spine. Miss Luo, that shadow. Vera? Stand-in wife? Luo Li's eyes were fixed on the darkness, and her lips curled up in a cold arc. Follow me. The trail of the truth ends. The heavy rain poured down like a curtain of blood, the cruise ship groaned and tilted, the lights of the first-class cabin loomed, the curtains of the mysterious Vera's room swayed slightly, and a wisp of Chanel No. 5 drifted in the wind, foreshadowing a deeper murderous intention. The smell of the second corpse approached, the tomb on the sea tightened its snare, Luo Li's shadow stretched into a god in the thunder, and the passengers shouted from a distance, The queen leads the way, kill the murderer. Fear turned to fanaticism, the ship's hull shook, and new mysteries swallowed up all living beings like giant waves. Thunder roared like a giant beast, tearing the night sky apart, lightning whipped the deck, rain pierced the bones like thousands of needles, Luo Li's windbreaker was soaked to the skin, and the cold sea breeze with the bitter smell of blood and almonds penetrated her nose. She stepped into the cargo hold passage. The darkness was like ink swallowing up the flashlight beam. The rusty and dripping sound of the walls echoed like a ghost weeping for blood. The iron plate under her feet was slippery and had a faint sticky thread, the remnants of sea blood. Mu Xue clutched her arm tightly, her nails digging into her flesh, and her teeth chattering. "Miss Luo," that roar was like a person struggling with his throat. Ye Zhi staggered and followed her, the rain running down her face into a bloody ditch. He hit his knee on the iron plate, his voice cracking, the restricted area of the cargo hold. "Miss Luo, don't go in. The second corpse is over." The crew members' faces were as white as wax. After they collided with each other, some of them vomited out sour gastric juice, and the rainwater flowed into a yellow stream. At the end of the passage, the low roar stopped, leaving only the muffled thunderous roar of waves hitting the belly of the ship. Luo Li scanned the corner with her flashlight. There was no body, only a pool of almond mucus splashed. The smell was as pungent as a poisonous needle pricking the lungs, and the figure in the wall disappeared in a flash, accompanied by Chanel No. 5 ghostly floating away. She knelt down and picked up a button from the ground. C-17 was engraved on the gold edge, and the pupils reflected slight scratches. It was left by Vera. She escaped. Mu Xue gasped. Her legs were slippery and she knelt down, the rain hitting her face like a hammer. She, a living ghost? The cargo hold is empty but the corpse is hidden. Ye Zhi fell to her knees, holding the iron plate with both hands shaking like chaff, howling with tears mixed with the rain. "Miss Luo, God's eye. Button of evidence, but fierce the ghost in your hands, we are dead." The crew member stared back and hit the box, his voice breaking. "Queen, stop. Shouting figure, please spare your life." The taunts came from the passengers in the distance, and someone slammed the door and shouted, "The detective took the lead to die?" The ship overturned and the ghost came out of the cargo hold. The whole ship was laughing. Luo Li stood up, ignoring the panic, and turned around like iron in the wind and rain. "Go back to the house arrest room. Ye Zhi has hidden a lot." Her voice cut through the wind like a knife, and Mu Xue's heart was shocked. She climbed up and followed her, tears of admiration shining in her eyes. The cruise ship shook violently, the lights went out 3 times, screams broke out, passengers rolled on the carpet in groups, and urine and blood steamed into mist. Ye Zhi climbed up and shouted to the crew, "Lift Ye Zhi." Smash opened the iron cage, full speed. The iron door clanged again. Ye Zhi curled up and trembled. Her evening dress was torn and her shoulders were exposed with bruises, and her new fingerprints were like ghost claws. She looked up and saw Luo Li approaching. Her pupils shrunk to pinpoints, and she hit the iron railing with a sharp voice, "Don't come here. Capture Vera, she has the key, kill me." Luo Li took a step forward and put the magnifying glass to the tip of her nose. The cold metallic smell mixed with the smell of her sweat. "Tell me clearly. How many times did you take action during the love triangle dispute? Li Hanu's chest knife, pre-cyanide, your almond-flavored handkerchief, the cargo hold is your lover?" Ye Zhi's throat was dry, and her tears were like breaking a dam and smashing against an iron cage. She screamed, "I'm jealous. Li played with the 2 of us, and that bitch Vera snatched him away. I had a fight on the balcony and scratched his face, but I didn't kill him. At midnight, the fat rich businessman came to see me in the bar, proving that he was not present. The fat rich businessman came over after hearing the call. His bathrobe was loose and his belly was swaying, his fat face was distorted and he mocked, "Little girl, you are interrogating me as a witness?" Ye Zhi got drunk and vomited in my arms. "I'm wearing it." "But you, Luo Li, the god of shoe prints, howling ghostly in the cargo hold, believe it?" Luo Li turned to Mu Xue with a deep look in her eyes. "Love letter. The handwriting is worse." Mu Xue stood firm on her weak legs and handed over her cell phone to record the video. The rose ink was distorted like blood. "Miss Luo," I zoomed in, "the vibration frequency is 0.3 Hz, the ink is tilted to the right, and the center of gravity of the words is tilted back. It looks like the signature of Captain Kiao. A forged debt note." The whole place was dead silent. Kiao Zhixia's face suddenly turned livid, and she was sweating like rain. The walkie-talkie dropped to the ground. Her knees were weak and she knelt in front of the iron cage. Her voice trembled like a leaf. "Miss Mu is wrong. My ex-wife signed like me, but she died twice. Yeah. Vera is fake?" The bags under his eyes twitched and his pupils evaded. The crew looked at each other and gasped, "Captain's ex-wife? The love letter is written in magic." Ye Zhi's eyes widened and she burst into laughter. "Captain Kiao is hiding the secret. Is she your informant?" The fat wealthy businessman rubbed his eyes and murmured, his fat lips trembling, "The white-collar girl's handwriting is amazing. The captain's face is green. It's your turn to be the murderer." The passengers were startled, and the lady sat on her knees and shouted at Kiao, "Revenge of the captain's wife? It's over." Mu Xue's heartbeat was like a deer, and she grabbed Luo Li's sleeves and worshipped, "Miss Luo, am I right?" Luo Li nodded, raised her lips slightly, and grabbed Kiao's chin to stare at her. "It's useless to deny it. Reconstruct the scene." Luo Li pulled Ye Zhi out of the cage and pushed her to the deck model table. The rain poured down the window like a drum, and the lights swayed and elongated the shadows into ghosts. She traced the remains of shoe prints on the carpet with her fingers, and her voice was as low as a curse. "The murderer killed Sweet Li." The knife penetrated 7 centimeters into the chest, and the blood spurted in an arc and splashed into the vine ditch on the soles. Stepping on the blood, he walked 8 steps to the balcony, carrying a 30-kilogram corpse lifting device or a second person, and jumped from the hatch to the deck passage. It was not diluted by the rain. Sea blood was 0.8 newtons thick, and he was killed on the deck. Kiao Zhixia held up the table legs weakly, her eyes as wide as copper bells, sweating like rain. "Miss Luo. Jumping through the cabin door? The murderer is familiar with the hole, and the repairman is inside." Ye Zhi sat down and smashed the model in tears. "Vera's lover key, but I am not worthy of the 41-year-old. Mu Xue sniffed the air and muttered, "Cargo button C-17, shadow escape first class." The fat rich businessman backed up and hit the wall, his voice broke, "On-site reconstruction, divine brain. Shoe prints jump into the air, monster reasoning." The crew knelt down and worshipped, murmuring, "The Queen locks the truth, the ship's savior." Luo Li ignored it and knelt down at the cabin door to see the shoe prints with a magnifying glass spinning like lightning, compared to identify 3 suspects. Fu Han borrowed shoes with uneven depth of size 42, Ye Zhi's lover maintenance worker. "You scratched, saw him last night?" Mysterious stand-in, Li twin brothers, matched the load. Ye Zhi nodded tremblingly, "My lover Archiang, I borrow Vera's money from the shoemaker, the shadow of my substitute wife." Kiao Zhixia got up and shouted into the intercom, "Broadcast. Scan the footprints of all members, gather in the deck comparison area. Increase the house arrest." The broadcast echoed harshly, "Urgent. Detective Luo Li ordered that everyone take off their shoes and have their footprints scanned, and those who refuse will be imprisoned. The passengers exploded, and the economy class door smashed open, shouting, "Take off your shoes in the middle of the night? Crazy! Captain, listen, girl, rebellion." The noble lady threw her high heels and smashed against the wall. "My feet are smelly." "You are the murderer." The fat rich businessman took the lead in pushing. In the chaos, the lights went out, stampedes and screams were everywhere, some people fell to the ground and their bones were broken, and the urine was filled with blood and sweat like a steamer in hell. The crew suppressed them with sticks, and Qiao Zhixia's face turned pale and she knelt on Luo Li's feet. "Miss Luo, there's chaos." The passengers rebelled and the boat capsized. Luo Li glanced at the chaos with cold eyes, grabbed the victim's cell phone, and found it from Li's suite. The cracks on the screen reflected the blood. She pressed unlock, her bloody fingerprints were sticky, and her fingertips slid over the last call, 11:47 midnight, to Fu Han. The voice was intermittent. The substitute plan was exposed. "Fu Han, you dare to say, I will wipe out the debt." The surveillance screen of Fu Han's house arrest room was synchronized. In the iron prison, he punched the wall, his sinister smile twisted. "Little girl heard?" Li begged for mercy. "I did not move." Luo Li's eyes flashed coldly. "Before the exposure, you two the call lasted for 5 minutes. The shadow of the substitute wife, yours?" Fu Han glared through the iron fence, his voice sharpening. "Evidence?" "Director Li, I'm the victim." When Qiao Zhixia heard that her knees were weak, she threw herself on the table and cried, "The phone is irrefutable." Ms. Luo's heartbreaking skills. The 3 suspects are locked up. The passenger was eavesdropping, and the fat businessman stared and rubbed his belly. "The call is exposed, Fu Han is done." Detective Laser Eyes, sweep away the ghost. In the chaos, Mu Xue was ordered to patrol the closed area of the restaurant. Water curtains poured out of the storm windows, the tables and chairs shook like a war, and the candlelight flickered and caused ghost shadows. She opened the door and smelled the smell. The salty sea water mixed with new leather. Fu Han took off his shoes before being placed under house arrest. The cupboard was empty? No, there is a pair of Aldo Rossi in the corner. The arabesque pattern is wet, but the left heel has a 0.5 centimeters crack, deeper than the original shoe. The inner lining is not worn and the sole of the foot is 0.1 centimeters narrow. Replace with new shoes. Miss Luo. Fu Han's shoes have been changed, she screamed, her legs weak and hitting the table, her hands red and swollen with candle wax splashing. The roar of the distant cargo bay started again, the almond drifting intensified, the figure's eyes flashed red, the first-class C-17 curtain shook violently, and Chanel filled the air like poisonous mist. Luo Li rushed over after hearing the news, whipped her face with a rain whip, knelt down to scan the shoes, and sniffed the camouflage smell of glue with the tip of her nose, changed shoes to manipulate the evidence. The mole is close, and the storm is covering up. Qiao Zhixia rushed over, her face was ashen and she knelt down, holding up her shoes with trembling hands. Miss Luo, who? The passengers are in chaos, the murderer changed shoes, God doesn't know. Mu Xue grabbed Luo Li's arm, chills ran down her spine and she cried in admiration. Miss Luo, did you predict the cargo hold? The second corpse is approaching. Passengers. The crowd turned frenzied, and the noble lady knelt down and howled, shoes for ghosts. The queen is chasing, but the mole is killing the ghost. The fat rich businessman pushed and worshipped, compared to God, evidence manipulation. Captain, kneel down. The tilt of the cruise ship intensified, the waves engulfed the deck, the lights went out, A low roar approached the door of the restaurant in the dark. Almonds were as bitter as the breath of death. Vera's red eyes flashed. A pair of vine shoe prints were wet and winding, and the load was heavier. The second corpse was dragged. Luo Li stood up. The shadow in the lightning was like a magic weapon, and he said with a murderous arc, "Everyone is scanning non-stop. The inner ghost is revealed." The heavy rain and blood curtains are overwhelming. The ship groans like a broken spine. The new crisis is like a giant beast opening its mouth. The fear in the bond turns to iron blood. Mu Xue vows to follow her forever. Qiao Zhixia bursts into tears and obeys her life. The sea net is tightened, and the trail of the truth shines with blood at the end. The lights flickered again, and the candle flames in the closed area of the restaurant stretched the shadows into ghost claws. The rain curtain smashed on the portholes like thousands of ghosts knocking on the door. The sticky air mixed with bitter almonds and new shoe glue pretended to be pungent. The vines and shoe prints winding through the cracks of the door were moist and brushed, and the heavy marks were sunken into the carpet like trenches for dragging corpses. The passengers were jostling and panting. Their bare soles stepped on the blood-streaked cold iron plates, and they screamed, "Scan? Take off your shoes in the middle of the night and step on shit." Luo Li destroyed the ship, and the murderer burst out laughing. The lady shook her hair and burst into tears, pointing at Mu Xue and screaming, "The white-collar bitch tricked us into dying barefooted by changing shoes." The fat rich businessman's belly trembled. He rubbed his eyes and stared at the cracks in his new shoes, and his voice broke. "Fu Hen changed his shoes and it was you. The devil inside the ship. Kneel down and lick the detective, you traitor." Qiao Zhixia leaned on the table legs, beads of sweat bursting down her nose and hitting her shoe marks. She knelt down and yelled at the intercom, "Continue scanning. Suppress with iron rods. Those who refuse will be thrown into the sea." The crew members waved their sticks, and the screams of bone cracking mixed with trampling and urine turned into mist. Mu Xue leaned against Luo Li with her legs weak. Her hands were red, swollen, and stinging, and her heartbeat was like a deer hitting her ribs. "Miss Luo, the roar is approaching, and her red eyes are staring at the crack in the door." Luo Li ignored the chaos. The magnifying glass on her knees whirled and buzzed. The metal was cold and reflected the thunder. She sniffed the glue with the tip of her nose. Within 2 hours, the pupil-shrinking needle scanned the narrow soles of the feet by 0.1 centimeters. Pause Fu Hen comparison. Record the footprints of all members. First Class C, 17 has priority. Her voice was pierced like a knife, and the passengers were buzzing with doubts. The fat wealthy businessman backed away, hit the table with candles, heated his legs and screamed, "Priority? Fu Han's shoes are 98% matched. Are you letting the tiger go?" Luo Li stood up, her windbreaker dripping with blood, grabbed Qiao Zhixia's collar and looked closely, opened the iron prison. "Fu Han released, release." The whole place was dead silent. Thunder boomed, Qiao Zhixia's eyes twitched, and her knees smashed. "Luo, Miss Luo?" The shoe prints match the gods, and the burden is on the inside. "Release? The ship is destroyed?" The crew members collided with each other and dropped their sticks, their faces white and round. "The queen is wrong? Fu Han is the murderer. The ironclad proof is that you need to change your shoes." Ye Zhi was curled up in the iron cage. Her evening dress was torn in tears, and she broke down with a sharp smile. "Let him go? Vera drags the body with red eyes. You will all die." Mu Xue grabbed Luo Li's sleeves and trembled, worshipping and fearing. "Miss Luo, why?" Fu Han's phone call was exposed. The shadow wife. Surveillance footage showed Fu Han standing in an iron prison. He punched the wall, his sinister smile twisted and turned into shock. He glared at the camera and grinned his teeth. "Little girl, admit your mistake?" "I am not guilty." Luo Li snorted coldly and pressed the intercom. Deck comparison area, Fu Han's 42 code retest. Public reconstruction. The broadcast echoed harshly throughout the ship. Luo Li's order. Fu Han is released. The retest is open to the public. Assemble in the restaurant, and those who refuse to stampede will be shot. The passengers fried even more intensely, after the cabin door was smashed open and roared, "Is it public wrong? The detective is pretending to be a ghost, but the captain will die if he obeys." The noble lady rolled around on the blanket and wet herself, and the fat rich businessman pushed the leader, "Burn her." The shoe god overturned and died of laughter. Ye Zhi climbed up, tears mixed with sweat, and howled the crew, "Carry Fu Han. Hurry." The iron door clanged, and Fu Han stepped out of the shadow of the prison. His leather shoes hit the iron and sneered. The passengers backed up and hit the wall, screaming and scattered around the open space, treating him like a ghost king coming to the world. Luo Li enlarged the shoe print on the model table, and the drums gushed out of the rain window like blood pulsating. She traced arcs of blood spurts with her fingers, and chanted in a low voice, "The vines of Fu Han's shoes match 98%, but the weight mark is 2.3 centimeters deep and skewed to the left inner 8. The center of gravity is 1.7 meters short, and the body is dragged 30 kilograms. The arc diameter is 0.4 centimeters narrower. The short murderer is not Fu, who is 1.85 meters tall." She put the magnifying glass against the cracks in the new shoes, and the pungent smell of glue mixed with sea blood was 0.8 newtons. "Change shoes to cover, it is not Fu's ghost. Fu Han, call Li Rio to expose the double, you are innocent." The whole ship was shocked and dead. The wealthy businessman rubbed his eyes and sat down on his knees, his plump lips trembling as he said, "Short with a heavy load?" His mind turned upside down. Fu Han was not guilty. The detective admitted wrongly, "Monster." The noble lady knelt down with tears in her eyes, pointed at Luo Li and murmured, "Publicly admit your mistake. The wisdom of the gods is overwhelming, and the shoe prints are short." Ye Zhi held the table, her knees trembled, and she sweated. Ruyu cried with admiration, "Miss Luo, the mistake was made public, brave." Fu Han-chi, the evil dwarf mole. The crew members knelt down and worshipped the stick, and their voices broke, "Queen, check yourself, lock the dwarf. Save the ship." Mu Xue's heart was shocked, and she grabbed her arm and worshipped with tears flashing, "Miss Luo. I predict the load, I am blind." Fu Han's dark smile subsided, and he tapped his leather shoes closer, his eyes flashing coldly, but he lowered his head, "Little girl, you have poisonous eyes. I've seen the stand-in Xiao Li, the Li twin brothers, 1.65 meters short and fat, who hid the body on the deck and threw it into the sea." Ye Zhi famously curled up and trembled violently, bruised and bruised. The fingerprints on her green shoulders were as red as ghost claws, and she screamed in the back of her throat, "Xiao Li. I introduced you. Li was playing with my Vera triangle. I was jealous and introduced my lover Xiao Li to him. I falsely insured twin doubles and ensured the loan of 500 million women's shadow wives and shoes. But last night, a Cheong repaired and met Xiao Li's deck." Mu Xue stood firm with weak legs, shaking hands, and handed Ye Zhi an almond handkerchief, sniffing the remains of Chanel No. 5 mixed with new ink love letters, "Miss Luo, triangular details. When I was patrolling, I heard Vera C-17 whisper, 'Xiao Li's debt is cleared, and my footprints are locked to you.'" The passengers were buzzing wildly, and the fat wealthy businessman got up and pushed him close to Yi, introducing a body double to cheat on insurance? A bitch's move, divine judgment. Ye Zhi, with a sallow face, knelt on the table and her voice trembled. "Xiao Li, missing list, Maintenance worker Archiang borrowed shoes from his lover, the short code matches. Luo Li's eyes were as deep as abyss. She grabbed Qiao's chin and stared coldly. Xiao Li's shoes. Get them from the maintenance cabin. Qiao Zhixia's pupils shrank. Her sweat dropped and she smashed the table. Her knees softened again and howled. Miss Luo, I'm hiding it. Ye Zhi, my ex-wife's daughter. Family debt Li. They extorted 30 million yuan and sent me a signed portrait. I acquiesced to the investigation, for fear of being implicated. The whole audience roared with thunder. Ye Zhi screamed and broke down. She threw Qiao Huai and scratched his face. Dad! Are you selling your daughter to hide the blood debt? The fat rich businessman hit the wall and stared at him. Captain's father. Girl? A debtor, a murderer in the family. The crew members looked at each other and gasped, kneeling down. Hide your blood relatives. God is going to rip your heart out. Mu Xue felt chills running down her spine, and her hands burned with tears of admiration. Miss Luo, the handwriting of my ex-wife, your daughter, is a divine connection. Staring, he stood up and shook off the rain. Xiao Li's shoes are compared. Qiao, lead the way to the cabin. Qiao Zhixia got up and burst into tears to accept the order. The crew followed with the model, and the passengers worshipped and pushed. Short and fierce Xiao Li, lock the shoes. The queen and her daughter are in debt. Chase. A brief moment of tranquility descended on the restaurant. After a break from the storm, the waves licked the deck like an animal's breath. The steady flame of the candle reflected the wet shoe prints. Luo Li took inventory by the window, and the replay of Li's call on her cell phone was intermittently. The stand-in was exposed. Xiao Li was thrown into the sea. Fu, you dare to say destroyed. She sniffed the almond residue, muttered to himself, Button C-17 in the cargo hold. Vera escaped, dragging the body with a roar. Xiao Li's substitute died. A chain of events. Mu Xue served tea with trembling hands, and the heat steamed her face to relieve the redness and swelling, and she whispered admiringly, Miss Luo, fix it, you are so distracted, I will record. Fu Shi, Yi Zhao, Xiao Li Suo and Qiao's father and daughter are in debt. The strength has increased, but the inner ghost has become smaller. Luo Li nodded, raised her lips slightly, and wiped the metal with a magnifying glass. Improved. The seaweed in the shoe grooves is microscopic, indicating that the cabin blood is new. The passengers spread out and whispered in admiration, and the lady knelt down and wiped her feet in worship. It's wrong to reveal it, God is humble. The short vicious footprints returned. The fat wealthy businessman rubbed his belly and murmured, inventory is like a battle, the detective is invincible. Qiao Zhixia stood guard outside, her knees softened and she lowered her head to wipe her eyes with tears. Family atonement, follow. The air was gentle, the sea breeze sent salty almonds, the thunder was like a breath, and the silence was like the silence of a tomb before a storm. The lights flashed suddenly, and the lights on the whole ship were extinguished 3 times. The storm came again and the beast roared. The waves engulfed the deck and roared like a broken spine. The cruise ship lurched to the left. The tables and chairs were turned over with clang and the carpet was slippery. The passengers screamed and rolled in groups, peeing and steaming again. Luo Li rushed out. Her windbreaker was pricked by the rain, and she traced new footprints on the deck. The vines were wet and short, with a narrow arc and a heavy load, dragging them 0.5 centimeters deep. She turned to the left and headed straight to the cabin door. Sea blood, sticky brushed mixed with new almonds, was as bitter as poisonous mist. Qiao Zhixia staggered to follow and yelled at the crew, turn on the lights. Miss Luo is chasing me. Mu Xue followed closely and grabbed her arm, her nails embedded in her hands and trembling with fear. Miss Luo, the new seal is short, roaring in the cabin. The lady looked through the crack of the door and howled, Deck ghost feet. The queen is chasing me, save. The fat rich businessman climbed up the window and stared, his belly trembled loudly. Heavy rain seal appears, divine legs. The cabin door squeaked with rust, the darkness swallowed the flashlight beam, the internal gears roared like an animal's throat, the smell of oil mixed with crushed seaweed stung the nose, water dripped from the cracks in the wall and weeping ghosts cried blood, and a pool of blood flashed at the end of the winding footprints. Luo Li stepped in with one step, carrying her skates against the wind and rain. She squatted down and turned the magnifying glass, sniffing the smell of glue mixed with the silver handle of the new breast knife. Xiao Li's shoes fit perfectly. The groove is 0.2 mm seaweed, and the left crack is 0.5 cm deep. Qiao Zhixia smashed her knee against the iron plate, and the light came back to reflect the body. Xiao Li was floating in a pool of blood. His chest was stabbed 7 centimeters with a silver-handled fruit knife. Blood sprayed in an arc and splashed on the wall. His eyes were wide open, his lips were stained with almond foam, and his short, fat body was twisted and his throat was scarred, and he was struggling and roaring. Mu Xue's legs were soft and she knelt down, screaming to the intercom, "Corpse!" Xiao Li was stabbed, serially. But a cold whisper came to her ears, like ghost vomiting in the wind and rain. The footprints will come back. Her hair and bones were cold, looking back at the red eyes of C-17, the curtains flashed, Chanel No. 5 poisonous fog pressed into the door, and the ship's hull was engulfed by waves again. The cabin gears turned wildly like an animal awakening, vine shoe prints were dragged backwards in the darkness, and the new wet load became heavier. The third corpse? Luo Li's figure was like lightning, her lips raised and she grabbed the handle of the knife and said, "Vera," appeared. The thunder whip tore through the sky, the blood curtain of crisis was overwhelming, and a series of murderous intentions spread across the sea. The gears in the cabin roared like a breathless beast, oily seaweed was broken and stuck to the cracks of the wall, and blood dripped from the cracks. The lightning whip door flashed and the short corpse of Xiao Li twisted his chest with a silver-handled knife 7 centimeters deep. The blood spurted arc and splashed on the brushed iron plate. Almond bitter mist evaporated and pungent, and the throat mark was red and swollen like a roar. Luo Li's fingers were bloody and the handle of the knife was cold. The wind and rain were pouring down her back and the acupuncture windbreaker was soaked to the bone. Her pupils shrank and the needle tip swept away the slipper marks. The vines were wet and heavier. The weight was 3.2 centimeters deep, the arc diameter narrowed 0.3 centimeters to the left of the inner 8, and the sea blood viscose was newly mixed with C-17 curtain red. Eyes pressed against the door, the whisper echoed, "The footprints will come back." Outside the door, Mu Xue smashed her knees against the iron and fell to her knees. Her hands were scalded, red and swollen, and her nails were broken when she grabbed the door frame. Her fingertips trembled and she screamed loudly, which was harsh to the whole ship, "Serial." Xiao Li's corpse. The knife was the same as the original scene, and the short print dragged him to the third kill. Qiao Zhixia staggered and propped herself up against the wall, sweating and bags under her eyes twitching. Her knees went weak and she yelled at the crew, "Seal the cabin. Turn on the lights all the way, Miss Luo, a ghost with red eyes?" The passengers heard howls on the radio, and the economy class door smashed open and roared in the restaurant, "2 corpses of dwarfs." The detective locked the wrong door, and the ship died. Gui the woman rolled on the carpet and urinated again, pointing out that the fat rich businessman collapsed. Fu Qingbai, Xiao Li died, the inner ghost changed his seal and laughed. Luo Li, the girl chased the ghost to death. The fat rich businessman's belly trembled and hit the window, his fat lips trembled as he glared at the new seal on the deck. The heavy rain kicked back, the queen's leg was broken, monster. The ship's hull heaved violently, waves engulfed the deck, the ridge was broken, The lights went out 3 times, and the flashlight beam was turned into ghost claws. Luo Li ignored the whispering wind, the crouching corpse's magnifying glass buzzed and the rotating metal reflected the cold thunder. The tip of her nose lightly sniffed the glue mixed with almonds, which was fresh within half an hour. 7. Carrying a 30-kilogram body, the arc diameter is 0.4 centimeters narrow, and the drag is 3.2 centimeters. The real murderer Xiao Li pretended to be dead, and the original footprints were from the ghost in the shoe. She stood up and grabbed Qiao's collar and pulled it closer to look at the skates. Inform the whole ship. The 2 corpses are connected. It's a real murder. A patrol team is formed. I will seal the cabin. Mu Xue alibi search. Qiao's shoe prints are all over. Ye Zhi's knees smashed to the ground, beads of sweat poured down her nose, blood dripping from the body, her throat was choked with sobs, and she worshipped and feared. Miss Luo, she is so speechless, her red eyes are pressing against the door and I'm blocking it. Mu Xue's legs went weak and she got up, burnt and heartbroken, and she cried in admiration and said to the intercom, "Yes. Alibi recorded, passengers are suspicious of each other." Luo's voice on the whole ship broadcast like a curse. 2 corpses confirmed. Li Hanyu pre-cyanide turned into a fruit knife. Xiao Li's substitute silenced him. The real murderer pretended to be a traitor and sealed the cabin. He disobeyed the patrol and was shot. The passengers turned to death and howled in terror. The lady's eyes were full of tears and she knelt down and wiped her feet. The 2 corpses are condemned, but the red eyes whispered, "Patrol to death." The fat rich businessman stepped back and hit the table with candles, rolling his legs and shouting, "Pretending to be a traitor?" Luo Li set us up as a barefoot bait, and the captain knelt and licked him to death. The beast of the storm roared, smashed the portholes and knocked thousands of ghosts. The waves licked the deck with a salty smell that stuck to the lungs, and the air was as oppressive as tomb fog, filled with bitter almonds and filled with the stench of rotting corpses. Luo Li led the patrol team, Qiao, Fu Han, and the 2 crew members to suppress them with sticks. Raindrops and blood from their windbreakers trampled on the new seals on the deck to track them. The vines were wet and brushed and went straight to the crack in the cargo hold C-17 door with red eyes flashing. Fu Han's leather shoes tapped his iron shoes and his sinister smile subsided, and he whispered with vicious eyes, "Little girl, your eyesight is accurate. Xiao Li knows that I, Li, conspired to defraud 500 million in guarantees. He extorted my debt and exposed it. It's right to silence him." Luo Li snorted and ignored it. The flashlight beam pierced the door curtain, and the poisonous mist of Chanel No. 5 pressed into the nose like ghost vomit. She kicked the door with a clang, the darkness swallowed the shadow gear inside, and the gold-rimmed button in the corner was scratched and flashed with lightning. Mu Xue went to the restaurant to search for alibi. The passengers pushed and gasped, stepped on the blood-streaked cold iron plate with their bare feet, and yelled at each other, "Are you leaving at midnight? I'll lend you my dwarf shoes." The noble lady tossed her hair and burst into tears, pointing at Ye Zhi's curled-up corner. The introduction of a lover is cruel, falsely accusing the shoe god, cheap. Ye Zhi, with bruised shoulders and ghost claws red, curled up and trembled, and collapsed with a sharp laugh. "I have no idea. Shoes. Dad is hiding his debt. I hate Li." Mu Xue's legs were weak and the pen was shaking, and the burns were red, swollen, and stinging. The frequency was 0.4 Hz. The passenger shouted at the approaching tide, "White-collar patrol ghosts, alibi is fake." Her heartbeat was pounding and she said to Luo Li, "Ms. Luo." Qiao Zhixia left work on a rainy night, and the bar witness saw the deck, and Archiang repaired and borrowed shoes. The candles in the restaurant stretched out the ghost shadow, and the fat rich businessman pushed closer and glared at Mu Xue with a trembling belly. "The captain has left his post and is in trouble? The father and daughter are molested, burn." The crew swung their sticks, cracked their bones, howled, and mixed with the steaming mist of urine. Mu Xue dodged and bumped into the table. Hot tea was poured on her legs, and the redness and swelling worsened. Her admiration and fearful tears flashed through the intercom emergency report. Passengers are suspicious of each other. Kiao alibi is missing. Luo Li responded on the radio. Patrol suppression. Kiao, full record of the shoe comparison in the cabin. Kiao Zhixia's knees were soft and she led the crew to carry the model table to enlarge the picture. She sweated and smashed the shoe prints along her spine. Her knees trembled and she said, "Miss Luo, I left my post to check the debt. No one was killed. The whole ship was shaken." The lady knelt down and murmured in fear, "The captain is short? The daughter locked up by the family debt will die." Fu Han smiled sinisterly and fisted loosely. The leather shoes came close to the model and stared at the cracks. "My accomplice?" Li's conspiracy to cheat insurance was exposed. Xiao Li saw that I was throwing the phone into the sea. He knew too much. Luo Li put the magnifying glass on the whole shoe to compare. The passengers pushed around the empty space with their bare feet. The lights were flashing and they shouted close, "Faster!" Barefoot bait ghost laughs. She traced an arc with her fingers. Nose sniffed the newly mixed seaweed, and her eyes scanned Ye Zhi. The slippers were 0.2 centimeters narrow in the toe and refuted. Ye Zhi ruled out, "The size is 40 narrow and there is no weight inside." Ye Zhi was relieved and curled up in tears. The lady's eyes widened and she turned suspicious to Fu. "Fu's shoes are 98%. Li det, you will kill Xiao Li." The fat rich businessman's plump lips trembled and he leaned closer. "Conspiracy exposed, God dig. But the red-eyed C-17, the patrol is dead." Luo Li stood up, shook off the rain and blood, grabbed Fu Han's collar and looked at Han Yuan, proof of accomplice. The call was replayed. Li begged for mercy. Brother Fu's substitute, Xiao Li, knew about it, and fraudulently guaranteed the debt of 500 million yuan to be paid off. Surveillance screen. Fu Han stopped punching the wall and smiled sinisterly. The passengers were dead and thunderous. Kiao Zhixia had bags under her eyes and her knees, the sound of smashing tables. Fu conspired with Li? Little Li knew he was killed. Divine alliance. The crew members hit each other with sticks, fell to their knees, and said, "Ms. Luo's shoes are locked on Fu, you're the mole." At the Mu Xue restaurant, I heard that my legs were soft and my legs were slipping, and the heat was soothing the burns. I was afraid. "Miss Luo, alibi Kiao Q, brother Fu is exposed, God's brain." But the waves on the ship became more intense, the gears turned wildly, and the beast woke up, and the red eyes whispered in the crack of the cargo door again, "Will, come back." The passengers screamed and rolled around, the smell of urine and blood steamed into a mist, and the fat rich businessman climbed up the window and shouted, "Crisis! Patrol bait, Detective Inferior Ghost King, drop it in." Luo Li ignored it and led the team straight to Xiao Li's economy class cabin D-23. The rusty door lock squeaked and it was dark. The smell of mold and rot inside was stinging with almonds, blood was dripping from the cracks in the wall, and the broken silver thread of the bloody clothes under the bed flashed with a flashlight. The gold edge of the balcony key C-17 dropped to pieces of seaweed. Luo Li crouched down while the magnifying glass whirled, sniffing blood and mixing it with glue. Within an hour, she picked up fragments of blood on her fingertips. Xiao Li changed his blood clothes and threw them on the balcony, and the real murderer borrowed the C-17 key to escape in disguise. Mu Xue rushed to the door with her legs weak and leaned against the door, worshipping her with tears and scolding her. "Miss Luo, the blood-clothed key card, God dug up the chain." Kiao Zhixia stumbled and knelt on the bed. Sweat broke into pieces and his throat choked. I patrolled D-23, hiding it. Fu Han smiled sinisterly. lowered his head and stared evilly. Xiao Li gave me the line. Li cheated on me to join the crew. Triangle Vera was furious. Passengers heard the broadcast and chased after him, pushing and shouting, "Xiao Li's blood certificate." Mr. Fu locked up. The captain hid the patrol. The lady pointed to Ye Zhi and screamed, "Lover's room key?" Ye hiding the contract and falsely accusing him. Ye Zhi curled up, trembling and bruised. Her shoulders were red, her evening dress was torn and her handkerchief fell off. The carbon paper of the stand-in contract was exposed, and Li Fu signed the 500 million fraudulent guarantee. Ye Zhi's fake handwriting was trembling at 0.5 Hz and the ink was pressed to the right. "Dad. I falsely accused Fu of shoes to save the family debt. Hiding my daughter's identity, I hate Li Fu for playing with me." The whole audience was shocked. In the deathly silence, the fat rich businessman bumped into the wall with his eyes bulging. "Ye Zhang contract?" The captain concealed his daughter and falsely accused God. Why? Qiao Zhixia threw herself at the daughter's knees and burst into tears and scratched her face. "Chia. Dad sold the daughter to redeem the debt, hiding it from you." The crew member knelt down and smashed his stick, his face white and round. The father-daughter contract was exposed, the magic hook. But the red eyes are approaching, the third seal sinks. Luo Li's eyes were as deep as the deep. She grabbed Mu Xue's arm and whispered. The wind and rain whipped the window violently and smashed the window like a decapitation. Mu Xue, the real murderer, took advantage of the sea closure, and committed a perfect crime without any clues. The shoes were fake and the key was exchanged, and the C-17's red eyes were alive. Alibi full record. Qiao left the post and locked up. Mu Xue's heart was filled with ecstasy and tears of admiration, and she relied on scratching for burns and stings. Sleeve. Ms. Luo, close the prison, divine policeman. I swear to follow, whispering with red eyes of fear. The passengers were suspicious of each other and shouted, and the ladies hugged each other and wet the blanket. Father and daughter are framed? Mr. Fu is a ghost. Patrol bait ghost laughs. The fat rich businessman pushed closer to his belly and trembled. The disadvantage is overwhelming. The Luo Li group collapsed, and the ship capsized. The ship tilted again and the gear beast roared. The lights went out and roared close to the crack of the door. The new vines wet the shoe prints and dragged the heavy weight for centimeters deep. After going straight to patrol, the poisonous haze of sea blood and almonds filled the red eyes, and the shadow flashed, and the whisper was as cold as the neck of a knife. I'm back. Luo Li turned around to use the magnifying glass to swallow the cold light, and pressed his murderous lips, but his pupils flashed suspiciously. Qiao's knees were weak and sweaty, explosive eyes dodge. Ye Zhi breaks the contract with tears. Fu Hen fists loosely and smiles deeply. Crisis blood clouds crush the city. Serial murderous abyss opens in the sea. The third corpse's footsteps knock on the iron cold. Gears turn in the darkness like a heartbeat tomb bell. Suppressed despair like waves. Biting the bones, Luo Li's windbreaker drips blood and stands aloof, and the inferior sword arc is ready to go. The ship's hull was convulsing and heeling like a giant beast with a broken spine. The claws of waves gnawed at the iron portholes, the glass shattered, spraying ice and salt foam, stinging the face like needles. The light went out 3 times and swallowed everything black. The flashlight beam danced like ghost claws. The gears roared and the heart beat the iron plate like a tomb bell. The red-eye curtain flashed across the seam of the cargo door, and the whisper was as cold as a neck knife. Scraping bones. I'm back. The footprints. Lock you. The new vine wet mark dragged down and sank for centimeters. Meters deep. Sea blood glue brushed almonds are steaming and the bitter mist is rotten in the lungs. The passengers roar and the tide collapses and pushes the door frame of economy class D-23. The fat rich businessman hits the wall with his belly and his wax face twists and his fat lips tremble and scream. The third seal sinks. Luo Li's magic weapon failed. The patrol bait Ghost King descended. The boat capsized and everyone was killed. The lady rolled around on the blanket and urinated in the smelly mist. She smashed her knees against the metal and pointed at Luo Li's windbreaker, dripping blood. You chase ghosts and die. The mole's shoes are changed, and the red eyes are swallowed alive. Qiao Zhixia's daughter Ye Zhi's knees were weak and she scratched her face with blood. Her fingernails were broken and her throat was dry and she was choked with sobs. She was afraid of admiration. Miss Luo Zhi lied to me about selling her daughter. An alibi didn't want to lock me up? But God saved the ship. Ye Zhi curled up and trembled. Her shoulders were bruised. Her red evening dress was torn. Her handkerchief and charcoal paper contract were torn and ink was drawn on the ground, and she choked with tears. Dad. Xiao Li's threat was exposed. Video, triangle. I hate Li Wan and Vera scratching her face on the balcony. He wants 500 million to keep his mouth shut. Fu Han smiled sinisterly, fisted his leather shoes, lowered his head and whispered, Video? Li conspired with me to cheat on bail, and Xiao Li knew about it and the blackmail was wiped out. Mu Xue's leg was weak when she leaned against the door. It was red and swollen, stinging and steaming with heat. She admired her with tears and grabbed Luo Li's sleeves to rely on. Miss Luo, nightmare footprints chasing, red eyes whispering to the heart, swear to follow the gods. Luo Li's pupils narrowed and she ignored the whispering wind. Her windbreaker shook the rain, blood arced and lightning flashed aloft. The game in the abyss of her heart was like a sword cutting each other. The third seal was 4 centimeters heavy. It was not Xiao Li who carried the corpse and dragged it with him. The real murderer borrowed the corpse to exchange for the ghost in the shoes. C-17's red eyes are fake installed in a chain. There is no perfect prison in the closed sea, but there are micro gaps. The seaweed of Jiaxin is broken by 0.3 millimeters. The crack is deepened on the left side. The Aldo Rossi limited edition 42 size vine pattern non-Fu Han leather shoes are knocking. The shoe is lost on the balcony and the deck is forged to escape and Xiao Li is silenced. She sniffed the mist with bitter almonds and Chanel No. 5, which stung her lungs. She made a mental calculation. After killing Li, she changed her shoes to fake seals and dragged her body from the balcony hatch to the deck to throw away limited edition shoes. But the key to reversal is a shoe lost in the storage room, and the psychological game is as depressing as a wave of bone-gnawing waves. What if the inner ghost predicts the shoe ratio, and the abbreviation of FH in Fu Han is engraved to deepen the frame? And Vera hates Li for destroying the family and the triangle video exposes the false suicide? She pressed her lips with murderous intent, grabbed Mu Xue's arm and whispered the ice blade. Mu Xue, search the logs. Fu, give the insurance documents. Yi, tell all the details of Xiao Li's threats. Patrol to suppress. Xinyin chases the storage room. I will reappear. Mu Xue's heart was hurt by the deer collision, burns, and stinging legs. He stood up softly and burst into tears of admiration. The intercom reported, yes. Abnormal passengers are boarding in the captain's cabin. When the passengers heard the roar, they became silent and howled in fear. The fat and wealthy businessman bumped into the wall with bulging eyes and his waxy face twitched. Repeat the route? The Ghost Seal Patrol will die. The girl is at a disadvantage. The storm monster roared and smashed through the portholes. The sea water poured back with fishy and salty tongue. The ship rolled over and engulfed the deck. The iron ridge was broken and roared. Luo Li led the patrol team. Qiao's knees were soft with sticks. Fu Han knocked on his leather shoes and smiled darkly. The 2 crew members shook their sticks with flashlights to suppress them. The windbreakers were dripping with blood and stepped on the newly printed brushed wires. They chased the E-45 door of the storage room. The rusty lock creaked and pried open, swallowing the darkness. The residual odor of rotten almonds is as pungent as tomb fog. Water drips from the cracks in the wall and weeps and draws threads. Iron cans are dumped from the shelves and rolled, smashing into ankle bones and cracking, howling. Thunder Whip door flashes vines in the corner. Wet shoes Aldo Rossi limited edition 42 sizes. Discarded sea blood glue. Seaweed crushed 0.4 mm engraved with FH Fuhan abbreviation on the inside. Metal needle mark fresh 0.2 cm deep. She crouched down while the magnifying glass whirled and whirled, the cold light piercing her pupils. Her heart was like lightning, forged and framed. The center of gravity of her shoes was left and inward, 1.7 meters short. The arc diameter of the body was 0.4 centimeters narrower, which matched the third seal, but the engraving frequency of 0.3 Hz. The ink on the right was like Ye Zhi's fake handwriting on carbon paper, not Fuhan's loose and rough fist. Her fingertips were sticky with blood. She picked up the shoes. Her nose was sniffing the glue and mixed it with Chanel. Within half an hour, she stood up, grabbed Fu's collar and looked at Han Yuan. The shoes are engraved with FH, are they yours? I gave him the receipt before I joined the gang and it was exposed. He used this shoe to silence me on the balcony. He wet his suit pocket and soaked the carbon paper with the ink on the insurance receipt. Li Hanyu's 500 million life insurance company, the beneficiary Fuhan and Xiao Li's twin brothers, Vera's pseudonym Charlotte, and the fake visa were dumped on the deck. Qiao Zhixia sweated and hit the shoe next to her knee. She smashed the iron along her spine. Her eyes twitched and her eyes widened in admiration. Ms. Luo, the store shoe FH God is digging. The documents show that the stand-in swindled the insurance, and Director Li is trying to steal my family debt. Passengers came after me and pushed and yelled. The lady pointed at her shoes and screamed and rolled around. Fu's shoes are engraved with the name of the mole. God's judgment has failed, and he is chasing after you. Luo Li snorted and ignored, and the turbulent game in her heart deepened. The path reappeared. The murderer killed Li's chest with a pre-cyanidized fruit knife 7 centimeters in an arc of blood, dragged the body to the balcony and exchanged it for Aldo Rossi's pseudo-Fuyin Shen 3 centimeters to the cabin deck and threw his shoes for storage, then borrowed Xiao Li's D23 key to exchange for short shoes to kill his mouth and dragged for centimeters backwards from the cabin back to the sea. 17 red-eye curtain, Chanel's. Poisonous mist whispered to lock the witness. But there are slight inversions. The E45 is not in a straight line on the deck when the shoe is lost. The heel of the waves moves with a deviation of 0.5 nautical miles, and the insider predicts the patrol and changes the shoes before sinking. She grabbed Qiao's collar and pulled her eyes closer. Log, abnormal passenger Vera's boarding record. Qiao Zhixia's legs went weak, beads of sweat broke out in her throat, and she choked. Miss Luo, hide. Vera Charlotte faked her ex-wife's name. Chiang repaired her husband and introduced a short and fat stand-in. I checked the debt and left the post to shadow the deck. Mu Xue restaurant split legs. Pushing open the captain's cabin door with the sting of a soft burn, the ghostly shadow of the candle stretched out, the iron table log turned over the wet pages and the ink was blurred, the seaweed fragments stuck to the corner and the abnormal note read, during Charlotte at midnight, Aldo Rossi Vine shoes of size 42, Chanel No. 5 pungent, Chiang's maintenance signature and borrowing key C17 cargo hold. Her heart beat. Nightmare flashback, footprints in the night and vines chasing bare feet against the cold steel, sea blood almonds and bitter mist pressing into the neck and red eyes whispering, come back, burnt and swollen legs limp and kneeling with tears on the intercom, screaming, Miss Luo. Diary Vera's abnormal appearance, Chiang borrowing the key to the C17 mole. Nightmare footprints chasing me. Thou, follow. The sound of snow on the whole ship was piercing like a curse, and the passengers were buzzing from silence to howling in fear. The lady knelt down and wiped her feet with eyes wide open. God damn the white-collar log. The captain lied to his ex-wife. He is a ghost husband. The fat wealthy businessman stepped back and hit the table with candles, flipping his legs and shouting, Vera's red eyes are really the murderer? The Luo team reversed, and the FH shoes are trapped in the leaves? Ye Zhi curled up under the D-23 bed and burst into tears. She burst into tears after hearing the radio drama and burst into tears. Mu Xue scratched her legs and bruised her shoulders. Video. Xiao Li threatened to expose me. Vera Li scratched her face in a triangle on the balcony and was jealous. He hit the C-17 secretly filming the almond handkerchief and crushed it. I was silenced by 500 million fake fu shoes and framed. La Yi stood up. Miss Luo's magic hook. The video captured Xiao Li's knowledge and silenced him. Luo Li broadcast back harshly and coldly. The path was reconfirmed. Kill Li in exchange for the fake imprint of Fu's shoes and throw away the E-45, borrow Xiao Li's key to silence him and drag him back to C-17. Vera's red eyes are the devil, a Chiang Fu's line. Alibi recorded all. The surveillance resumed to check the shadow. The crew members bumped into each other and lost face. Wax knelt down in deep admiration and shouted, Miss Luo has returned to the path of God. Shu FH's frame-up is exposed, reversed. Fu Hen fisted loosely and smiled darkly to cooperate, eyes flashing with poison as he lowered his head. The documents prove that Li self-directed the stand-in, and I am innocent and joined the gang to blackmail and exposed. Xiao Li's video shows that Vera hates it. Qiao Zhixia's knees went weak and she lifted the diary model table to enlarge the picture. She sweated and hit the page and choked in admiration. Miss Luo, extraordinary revelation. I sold Jia in debt to my father and daughter. Alibi's ex-wife is fake. The passengers pushed around the empty space and stepped on the blood-streaked ground. The lady burst into tears and knelt down to wipe her feet and murmured. The diary video shows the shoe ID hook, but the red eyes whispered, the fourth seal is coming. The fat rich businessman's belly trembled and he pushed close to the wax face. Slight reversal? The captain's wife is a ghost, patrolling to suppress the ghost smile. The cruise ship was shaking violently, the gears were spinning wildly, the waves were engulfing the deck, the iron ridges were broken, the lights were extinguished. Luo Li led the team to the control room F-12, the flashlight beam pierced the foggy almonds and bitter sticky lungs, the door was kicked, and the internal circuit sparks sprayed out pungent and burning glue. The screen flashes back to the scene of a stormy night. The dark shadow on the deck is heavily dragged by a body in Aldo Rossi's vine shoes. The thunder whip shines on the red-eyed curtain and turns around to leap into the sea and splash into huge waves, and Chanel No. 5 mist follows the sea blood. But Luo Li's heart-shrinking game was like a knife slicing through the clouds, the illusion of jumping into the sea. The seawater backflow deviation was 0.3 meters, the corpse was not floating, and the inner ghost swam back to the store to change shoes and live with red eyes. She sniffed the hot glue on the screen for fresh glue, and whispered to prepare for it. Fake suicide. The black shadow of Xiao Li's body, the murderer pushed the sea back to C-17. Mu Xue rushed to the wall. Her legs were weak, she was burned and stung, and her nightmares and tears smashed into her sleeves. Qiao Zhixia had bags under her eyes and banged her knees against the screen, sweating. The shadow jumped into the sea. I was hiding on the deck, and Jia recorded the video to lock Vera. Ye Zhi stood outside the door and burst into tears. Xiao Li threatened me. I hate the exposure. Fu Han knocked on his fist with his leather shoes. The documents for the stand-in plan are blackmailed by Li. All destroyed. The passengers heard the broadcast and shouted that the tide was approaching, and the ladies hugged each other and wet the blanket, staring in shock. Fake surveillance jump into the sea? Luo Shen's brain is reversed, and the inner ghost is revealed. The fat rich businessman's plump lips trembled and he hit the iron. The pressure of the crisis is slightly relaxed. The red eyes of the C-17 door flashed, and the new seal knocked on the iron cold. Fourth kill. The ship was tilted again, the beast was biting the bones, the gears were turning, the tomb clock was beating, and the dark mist was pressing into the abyss of despair. but Luo Li's windbreaker's bloody figure stood still. The magnifying glass turned the arc of the cold light sword to gain momentum. The key to reversal of the psychological game flashed, the layout counterattack started, and the red-eyed prison ghost fell into the trap. The hull of the ship twists like a heartbroken beast. The sea-claw iron hook tears the deck steel and twists and creaks. The waves smash the porthole glass and shatter the glass of the porthole. Ice and salt needles rain spray on the face. Biting blood seeps into the lips. The pulse of light cuts off 3 times and is swallowed by the black mist. The flashlight claws at the air. The bitter almond gas sticks to the lungs and corrodes. The gear heart beats wildly and the iron wall knocks like a death knell to count down. C-17's red-eyed shadow flashes through the cracks in the door and whispers, "The 4th seal, lock forever." The passengers in the economy class were pushed and collapsed, roaring. The fat businessman's belly hit the wall, his wax face twisted and his fat lips sprayed, screaming, "Luo Li's magic weapon has failed." The ghost is alive in the illusion of the surveillance sea jump. The ship capsizes and feeds the sea ghost king. The girl arranges a bait patrol to death. The noble lady rolled around on the carpet, urinating and smelling blood, and the steaming mist pressed against her head. Her knees hit the metal, and she knelt down and pointed at the bloody shadow of Luo Li's windbreaker. The disadvantage is overwhelming. Her shoes trapped Ye's father, her red eyes whispered, and the father and daughter's traitor sold the boat to kill them, and their brains collapsed. "I'm going to die." Mu Xue's legs were so weak that she leaned against the wall, burned, swollen and stinging like fire. She had a bone-gnawing nightmare. Her bare feet were covered in cold steel and sea blood vines were chasing her. She scratched Luo Li's sleeves with tears and trembled. "Miss Luo. The 4th seal is approaching, and I swear to follow the gods." The layout, but the waves are gnawing at the bones and the despair is deep. Qiao Zhixia's knees were weak and she was sweating with a stick and breaking the embankment along her spine, hitting the bags under her eyes, twitching and staring in fear. "Miss Luo, her red eyes are so intense. I sold Jia alibi Q in debt to my ex-wife, saved the ship." Ye Zhi huddled outside the door with bruises on her shoulders and her red evening gown was torn. She burst into tears and threw herself at her father's throat. She laughed sharply, "Dad. I hate the video exposure. The devil is not you." Fu Hen knocked on his leather shoes and punched his eyes, lowering his head and his throat was choked. "The stand-in document is clear to me. I borrowed Vera's shoes without killing anyone, but it's a ghost job." The passengers roared and pushed the circle to empty the circle. The crew members lost their faces and knelt down in fear, yelling, "The patrol bait is dead." The Luo team reversed and the 4th kill was full of red eyes and a smile. Luo Li's pupils narrowed and her needlepoint ignored the whispers. The cold wind was harsh, the windbreaker shook the blood arc and the lightning flashed and stood tall. The game in the abyss of the heart was like thunder slicing through the clouds, clues gathered to lock the throat. Log Vera abnormally boarded Archiang's borrowed key C-17, shoes E-45 FH pseudo-engraved handwriting at 0.3 Hz, monitored the deviation of 0.3 meters when jumping into the sea, and the corpse did not float back. Li was insured for 500 million and directed Xiao Li to silence him. The Yi triangle video threatened to crush the almond handkerchief, but the key to reversal was Zhou. His ex-wife Vera had a debt of 500 million and forced him to kill Li to silence him. The fake Fu Yinshen dragged the body by borrowing shoes from the deck of the movie, and the father and daughter concealed the truth about selling a boat to redeem debts. She sniffed the mist with bitter almonds mixed with cauldron, which was hot and stinging the lungs, mixed with the residual mist of Chanel No. 5. She pressed her lips with murderous intent and prepared to broadcast the ice knife to stab the whole ship. Emergency group meeting. Everyone gathered in the main hall of the restaurant, closed for investigation and final confrontation. The ghost in the red eyes surrendered, and the mystery of the footprints was revealed. The violators were shot and screamed. The fat rich businessman's eyes bulged and his face twitched. Death. The noble lady knelt down, wiped her feet, wet her feet and screamed, disadvantaged and desperate. The captain of Luo Shen's broken lock, the fourth seal with red eyes, is chasing the hall. Mu Xue's heart was hurt by the pain, her legs were weak, she got up and worshipped with tears flashing, clutching her sleeves and relying on her. Yes. Miss Luo's divine summons, the ghost inside the divine hook. The gear beasts on the ship were awakened and turned around wildly. The giant wave beast was chewing bones and breaking the iron spine. The passengers pushed and roared and rushed to the main hall of the restaurant. The iron door was kicked open with a loud bang, moldy rot, blood, smelly fog, lights extinguished, black flashlights swallowed, and ghosts dancing wildly. The main hall is tilted like a tomb, the iron legs of the long table scrape the ground and the tomb claws creak, the sea water pours in and sticks to the ankles, it is salty and cold, and the blood is mixed with it. The fat wealthy businessman's belly trembled and he pushed the table and his wax face burst into laughter. Luo Li has appeared. Fu Qing's shoes, Vera's red eyes are a real ghost. The group has set up a bait to kill the hall. The noble lady hugged each other and rolled on the carpet, peeing and screaming. The father and daughter sold the ship without paying the debt. The brain has failed and the red eyes are smiling. The crew suppressed each other with sticks and bumped into each other. With a waxy face, she knelt down in fear and murmured. The fourth seal knocked on the door of the hall. Luo's group collapsed. Qiao Zhixia's knees went weak and she lifted the corpse model table to expand the picture. She sweated and smashed the page, and her throat choked with fear. Miss Luo. Hall of Gods calling, alibi, I'm absent from duty, save the ship. Ye Zhi curled up and bruised under the table. With trembling tears, he smashed the contract and broke his throat. Dad is innocent, the video locked Vera's hatred. Fu Hen knocked his leather shoes close to him with a smile, his fists loosened and his eyes flashed with poison. The documents prove that Li directed it, and my shoes are fine. Mu Xue's legs were soft and scalded, and she pushed the door open to cry out for admiration. She burst into tears. Miss Luo. Captain. The room video was dug, and the love triangle balcony was fully exposed. I swear to follow. The blood shadow of Luo Li in the trench coat stepped on the center of the blood pool. The cold light of the flashlight pierced the eyes, the magnifying glass buzzed and the knife arced, ignoring the tide of ridicule. The heart game was like a tsunami rolling back, desire to rise first, suppressing the abyss of despair, bouncing to the sky. She grabbed Qiao by the collar, pulled her eyes close to the ice knife, stared into the abyss, and whispered like a death sickle scraping the bones. Qiao Zhixia, the real murderer. Your ex-wife Vera blackmailed Li with a debt of 500 million, forcing you to kill Li and silence him. She borrowed Aqiang's maintenance line to board the ship with Charlotte's false certificate. At midnight, C-17 pre-cyanide fruit knife was stabbed in the chest with a 7 cm blood spurt. In exchange for my lock, Fu Aldo Ross the fake imprint sank 3 cm and dragged the E-45 from the balcony door to the deck, which was framed by FH. The alibi missing on the shadow deck concealed the report and left the job. He then borrowed Xiao Li's D-23 key and exchanged it for short shoes to destroy the mouth. The cabin was dragged for centimeters back to the C-17 red-eye curtain to disguise the chain. The surveillance hall was filled with dead silence, and the whole hall collapsed with a howl of terror. Shang's belly exploded, his wax face distorted, he hit the table with candles, heated his legs and screamed, "The captain is evil? God broke the lock on the father." But there is no proof, the red-eyed Vera's ghostly smile has failed. The noble lady knelt down and pointed at Qiao, bursting into tears and hugging her. I concealed my ex-wife and sold my daughter, the disadvantage is overwhelming Luo Shen. Knock on the fourth seal hall door. Qiao Zhixia hit the table leg with her knees, convulsed, beads of sweat burst out, bags under her eyes burst, and her throat burst. Qian Jian laughed and denied, elusive judgment. Vera hates Li Fei, alibi shadowed the deck to check the debt and no one was killed. I saved the ship and my father and daughter broke down in tears. Ye Zhi crouched under the table and trembled, threw herself into her father's arms, scratched her face with blood marks and her throat was broken. Dad is innocent, his mind is wrong. The crew members fell to their knees and screamed in fear, the captain is evil? Who will be the patrol bait? The red eyes make me laugh. Luo Li snorted and ignored the taunt, her heart churning as she tried to play Thunder Slash, her trump card. She flung her windbreaker pocket shoes E45 Aldo Rossi Vine wet shoes with sea blood glue on the table. The seaweed was crushed 0.4 millimeters and the FH gold needle marks on the inside were fresh and 0.2 centimeters deep. The cold light of the magnifying glass pierced the pupils and buzzed. The DNA speed test of the blood in the shoes matched Xiao Li's blood type AB negative. Almond foam residual throat marks. Within half an hour, the glue was mixed with Chanel and the smell of your ex-wife. Fei Fu was rough. After you killed Li, you soaked in the sea water to wash away the blood and camouflage the rain. The third seal was 4 centimeters narrow and 1.7 meters short. The body was perfectly carried. The deviation was 0.5 nautical miles. The shoe was thrown and the patrol caught me. Her fingers were sticky with blood and she tore off the dried silver thread of the brushed blood and smashed it on the evidence table. The speed tester sprayed sparks, pungent and burning glue, and the green light flashed, 99.8% match for Xiao Li. The whole hall's pupils shrank and stared into deathly silence, then the roaring tide collapsed. The fat rich businessman's eyes bulged and his belly trembled, then he knelt down and his wax face twitched. His fat lips trembled, and he worshipped and screamed, DNA test. The blood in his shoes, Xiao Li locks the captain, and the Luo Shen brain crushes the mole. The noble lady rolled around on the carpet, wet her knees and hit the blood pool, tears streaming down her face and murmured, washing in the sea. Blood and fake rain, the mystery of the footprints is revealed, and the sky is reversed. The crew members hit each other with sticks and knelt down in admiration, shouting, the DNA in the shoes is sinister. The captain and his daughter concealed the debt and were killed, and the red eyes were fake. Qiao Zhixia smashed her knees on the table, sweating, her eyes twitching, her throat choking, and she stared in anger, false evidence. The quick test was burned out. I'm not going to kill you. Mu Xue's leg was soft and scalded. She pushed forward and admired the video with flashes of tears on the U-disc table. Keng, Ms. Luo's magic hook. The love triangle video was dug in the captain's room. The balcony Li Valai scratched her face and crushed her almond handkerchief with jealousy. The 500 million muzzle threat was exposed. Your daughter Ye Zhi covered up her fake handwriting and falsely accused Fu of saving the family. Family debt. The sparks on the screen returned and the lightning whip illuminated the scene. The scene was dazzling. In the dark night on the balcony, Li's stand-in pushed Vera's red-eyed shadow. Ye Zhi's shoulder was bruised and red, and he scratched his face with blood spraying out in bitter almond mist. Qiao Ying flashed under the door and whispered, the debt is cleared, Chanel No. 5's pungent sea blood brushed. Passengers buzzed and roared, and pushed, and squeezed tightly. The fat wealthy businessman's face was twisted and he knelt down and wiped his feet in admiration. He yelled, the video of father and daughter was exposed. Yi Churchi sold debts, and the captain cut his throat fiercely. The noble lady burst into tears and smashed the glass, pricking her feet with bloodshot eyes. They hugged each other and trembled. The triangle handkerchief on the balcony is pressed. Luo Shen digs in my heart, the inner ghost has revealed itself. Fu Hen punched his leather shoes in front of him and smiled deeply, eyes flashing with poison, lowering his head and breaking his throat. Admit it, providing Aldo Rossi's shoes to borrow Vera's line, without any intention of killing, only to swindle 500 million to expose Li's self-direction. It is not me to silence Xiao Li after knowing it. At the end of the play, she burst into tears, scratched her legs and scratched her bruised throat, and laughed shrilly. Dad, the video hid the video from me and sold my daughter to redeem my debt. I hate Li, but you are not the one to be killed. Qiao Zhixia's legs were weak and she crawled up, beads of sweat bursting from her eyes, and her eye bags exploded. Her fear and hatred blended into the abyss of despair, and the waves at the peak of the storm hit the steel plate on the roof of the hall, denting it with thousands of irons. Broken spines rumble, gears and tomb bells knock wildly, mist-pressed almonds, bitter and rotting lungs, red eyes whisper to the hall door, knocking on the cold iron wire, Suoyong. The despair in the whole hall overwhelms the tide of ridicule and turns to the tide of admiration. The blood shadow of Luo Li's windbreaker stands aloof, the magnifying glass, the cold light knife, and the deliberate game of the sky, crushing the perfect hell with wisdom. Suddenly, Qiao Zhixia choked with laughter and twisted her knees, her bags under her eyes twitched, and the flashlight fell to the ground. The gun on her waist flashed, and the silver light pierced her pupils. The cold muzzle was pressed against Luo Mu's forehead. The passengers were silent and howling in terror. They collapsed and pushed and yelled, "Captain's gun! God's fault has failed. The crisis is over." The fat rich businessman's belly trembled, his wax face collapsed, he hit the candle and screamed, "Draw out the gun and threaten." Luo Mu's red eyes closed. The lady knelt down and hugged each other. She was wet with urine and screamed, "Father, the murderer will be shot in the hall." Mu Xue's legs were weak and burned, stinging, nightmares flashed with fear, tears were thrown at Luo Xue, and she was trembling. "Miss Luo, the gun is forcing her heart, and she swears to follow the gods." Qiao's gun barrel scraped the blood on Luo's cheek and screamed with hatred, "God is wrong. Vera only hates me. I will kill you two in the cabin with a gun, and the ship will capsize and trap everyone." He punched Luo's arm with the gun on Mu's back and pushed the door open. Kicked open the iron ladder in the dark cave of the cabin and pushed down the clanging chain. The door creaked and locked. The darkness swallowed the shadows and the waves gnawed at the gears to turn the tomb clock's heartbeat. The red eyes approached the whisper and whispered, "The truth hangs by a thread." Luo Li's windbreaker's blood shadow chain grinned her wrists coldly, and the game in the heart lake was like the final thunder. Mu Xue curled up and was burned, stinging, and tears flashed down her sleeves. "Ms. Luo, the cabin prison, gun threat is hanging, God is against the sky." The passengers in the outer hall roared and knocked on the door, and the fat wealthy businessman's waxy face twitched and shouted in admiration, "Lo God lock the cabin. The captain is holding a fierce gun, the truth hangs on the edge of the storm, save the ship." The giant wave roared and bitten the bones, and the black mist pressed down on the abyss of despair, but the corner of Luo Li's lips was slightly murderous, and the key to reversal flashed, the ghost surrendered, and the sky was ready to explode. The black cave of the cabin is like an iron coffin abyss, the steel plate is dented and cracked by the huge waves, the gear heart is beating wildly, the iron claws are scraping the wall, and blood is echoing, the shadow of red eyes is flashing close to the crack of the door, and the cold wind is biting, the fourth seal, forever locked. The chain is wrapped around the wrist, and the cold drawing is grinding and the bleeding thread is sticky. On the ground, the darkness swallowed the shadow, the broken glass of the flashlight pricked the feet, stung the bones, cracked the bones, the bitter mist of almonds mixed with the burning glue, the heat rotted the lungs and stuck to the throat. Mu Xue curled up and was scalded, red and swollen, the heat was like fire, her legs were weak and her knees were smashed against the iron ladder. She was trembling in fear and tears, grabbing Luo Li's sleeves. chasing with eyes, vowing to follow the gods, but despair is heartbreaking. The passengers in the outer hall knocked on the door and roared, and the tide collapsed. The fat rich businessman hit the wall with his belly and his wax face twisted. His fat lips were sprayed and screamed. Luo Mu died in the cabin. The captain's gun was red-eyed and he was slaughtered in the hall. The gods failed and the whole ship was thrown into the sea. The lady rolled around on the blanket and urinated in a stinky manner. She pressed her knees against the blood pool and burst into tears. The pinnacle of disadvantage. The father's murderous gun threatened, the Luo Shen chains were wiped out, and the dream was shattered. The crewman's face dropped and he knelt down in fear, the patrol suppression collapsed, the fourth seal knocked on the cabin door. Luo team reversed and was slightly suspended. The bloody shadow of Luo Li's windbreaker stands tall and ignores the tide of ridicule. The game in the abyss of the heart lake is filled with thunder. The tip of the nose gently sniffs the bitter almonds in the mist mixed with sea fishy antiseptic and pungent chemical residues. The footprint liquid is not pure rain, and the captain's cabin cleaner is mixed with glue to make indentations with a frequency of 0.2 Hz. She pinched Mu Xue's arm with the needle point of her pupils and whispered the ice blade, prying the lock with high heels. The echo of the gunshot was delayed by 3.2 seconds and did not echo in the cabin. Kiao hid on the bridge and tampered with the route to avoid rescue, and her red eyes pretended to be Vera's ghost's trump card and used antiseptic to lock her throat. Mu Xue's heart was hit by a deer, and she was burned and stung. Nightmare Flash Terror Chong burst into tears, smashed his high heels, clanged the iron lock chain, creaked and opened the tomb, and the blood was sticky. The iron door bounced open, and the giant beast chewed bones, roared, pushed the iron ladder, and slid blood. Two shadows sneaked out of the black passage. The seawater poured in and stuck to the ankles, and the cold brushed blood was mixed. Water dripped from the cracks in the wall, and the bitter almonds steamed and rotted the lungs. The fat rich businessman put his ear to the door and his face twitched in admiration and screamed in admiration, "Unlock the gods and escape." Luo Mu is against the sky, the bridge log hook is vicious. The noble lady burst into tears and pricked her feet on the glass, trembling with her eyes wide open and murmuring, "High heels break the prison." God cuts the gun and listens to the heart, and the disadvantage hits the sky. The passage is cold and twisting like the belly of a snake, the lightning whip window flashes, the gears claw at the air, the cold light of Luo Li's flashlight pierces the pupils, the magnifying glass hums and rotates the arc of the knife, the nose sniffs the hot antiseptic glue, stings the lungs, mixed with the residual mist of Chanel, and points to the corner of the wall with shredded seaweed and 0.4 mm sticky silver thread drawn with dried blood, Captain of Footprints liquid antiseptic, 4. The exclusive use of the room, Kiao Li's shadow deck borrowed Archiang's key C-17 to pre-store. After killing Li, he was wet with mixed glue and fake rain. The inner ghost swam back and put on short shoes to kill Xiao Li perfectly. Swearing to dive into the bridge, the red-eyed whispers are heartbreaking, but the gods are rebellious. They jumped up the ladder, the iron ladder slid and creaked with blood, and the red light pulse flashed close to the bridge door and whispered Yin Dao, "The truth is ruined." Pushing the door, the steel plate twisted and smashed the glass, shattered, and the ice and salt needles rained on the face, and the console was on fire. The instrument needle jumped wildly off the course of Hawaii by 0.8 nautical miles and went straight to the rescue blind spot. The bloody finger indentation on the logbook revealed the midnight anomaly. Vera Charlotte boarded the ship and Archiang signed Aldo Rossi shoes size 42 vines and tampered with the route to avoid ghosts in the patrol. The ink was wet for half an hour. The piercing tomb bell rang through the whole ship's radio, and Kiao Zhixia's throat twisted and roared like a ghost. Luo Li Mu Xue escaped from prison. The explosive detonated the ship and killed everyone. I don't have a special license for the antiseptic cleaner for footprints. Vera only hates Li for blackmailing 500 million and destroying the family. If my father and daughter sell the ship to redeem their debts, surrender or be buried at sea. The passenger hall collapsed and was pushed by the roar of the tide. In the empty circle, the fat wealthy businessman's belly trembled, his wax face collapsed, he hit the table with candles, rolled his legs and screamed, broadcast the threat of bombing the ship. God's broken bridge log exposed the tampering, Ye Zhi was defeated and screamed in despair. The noble lady knelt down, wiped her feet and wet the carpet, burst into tears and hugged her group, the blind spot on the route. Luo Shen hook log, the disadvantage is crushing the father. Ye Zhi curled up with bruises under the table. The red-shouldered evening dress was torn apart, she was trembling, regretful, and in tears. She smashed the contract, her throat was shattered, and she banged on the door. Ms. Luo. My father hid the gun B-12 in the safe under the bridge. He videotaped it and hid it from me, selling his daughter to redeem my debt. I hate you, but it was your fault to kill me. I regret covering up FH for pretending to save the family, and shot to stop the evildoer. Fu Hen knocked on his leather shoes, punched his fist, and turned with a deep smile. He flashed poison in his eyes and led the crew with sticks to outflank the ship and yelled, Luo Shen hook log, I led a pincer attack on the bridge. The stand-in Xiao Li knew the truth and exposed the fraud of 500 million in bail. Kiao kept it secret from his ex-wife Vera, and the red-eyed devil sold the ship to kill her. There was no way to survive by blowing up the ship. The crew members bumped into each other and knelt down in admiration, shouting, Fu Hua Luo Shen. Outflank and trap the evil, the red-eyed disguise collapsed. Luo Li snorted coldly and ignored the broadcast threat. The tsunami of the game in her heart was rolling back. The cold light of the magnifying glass was whirling in the diary, the footprint of the antiseptic liquid sank for centimeters with a narrow arc diameter. Kiao Xiao's 1.7-meter-long corpse perfectly predicted the roll deviation of 0.5 nautical miles. Changing shoes E-45 Fu, the crack in the video door whispers, the debt will be wiped out, and your Vora sprint matches 99.2%. Vera falsely testified that a Chiang Fu boarded the ship with the red eyes and was not a ghost. It was you who borrowed shoes on the deck to pretend to be a chain. Mu Xue was burned and stung, and she pushed forward in admiration with tears shining as she shook her high heels. The cabinet was smashed with a clanging iron and the B-12 safe bounced open. The silver gun rolled to the cold and bloody ground. She grabbed Luo's sleeves and encouraged her tremblingly, Ms. Luo is amazing at spelling out clues. The anti-corrosion footprints, logs, flight deviations, and the gun are all locked up. Ye Zhi's mental breakdown and the broadcast blew up his bluff. The two of them sneaked into the passage and hooked each other. I swear to follow the gods and defy the sky. The black fog in the passage engulfed the gears and the tomb bell was knocking wildly. Two figures sneaked into the iron wall and knocked on the death bell for the countdown. The sea water was sticky and bloodshot, and the nose was antiseptic. The red-eye curtain with flashes of thunder approached behind the door and shouted in despair, God's brain, wrong. Suddenly the bridge door was kicked open. Kiao Zhixia had bags under her eyes, convulsed with sweat, and hit the instrument along her spine. She was choked in the throat, and the gun's silver light pierced her forehead. Her leather shoes struck the blood pool, and the wet vines were broken into pieces with 0.3 millimeters of glue. Her waxy face was twisted, her knees soft, and her fists hit the platform. She screamed in anger, Luo Li. You dig up the logbook and lock me, but the evidence there is no real hammer. Vera hates Li for destroying her family and extorting 500 million yuan to kill her stand-in, Xiao Li, crushing the almond handkerchief. It's not my father and daughter who sell the boat, you two will be shot to destroy the evidence and jump into the sea. The boat will fall into pieces. The tide of banging and roaring in the passenger hall was rising, and the fat rich businessman's waxy face twitched and he knelt down to wipe his feet and scream in fear. Kiao is now here. The body is exposed. The hidden hook in the divine passage is broken, and the traces of the anti-corrosion log are all broken. The noble lady burst into tears and pricked her feet with bloodshot eyes, trembling and trembling. The gun is on the forehead. Luo Shen's trump card is reversed, and the father's evil roar leaps into the sea to destroy the evidence. Fu Han led people to outflank the sticks and forced the door with poison. His head and throat were shattered. Kiao, the documents revealed that you lied to your ex-wife about selling your daughter. The ship was blown up and threatened to collapse. There is no way out for Luo Shenji. Ye Zhi was bruised on the ground outside the door and her throat was dry and she laughed sharply in regret. Dad. I shot the gun and destroyed the certificate and jumped into the sea. The debt was recorded and my mouth was wiped out. I regret hiding it from the female seller and hates Li Dan to kill the traitor. The blood shadow of Luo Li's windbreaker aloofly ignores the gun barrel that burns her cheeks and bloodshot eyes. Her heart game is like the final thunderous strike, sniffs the antiseptic glue hot mixed with Chanel on Kiao's leather shoes to sting her lungs, and the lining of her finger shoes is ripped open and the brushed silver wire blood-drying speed tester sparks a green light and flashes. Xiao Li's DNA 99.8% plus preservative captain's room 0.1 Hz indentation. She swung her pocket to monitor the U-disc, smashed it on the screen, and restored the Thunderbolt photos. The picture was dazzling, the black shadow on the deck, Joe, a short and fat corpse, dragged Aldo Rossi down for centimeters and was soaked in antiseptic fake rain. She jumped into the sea and pretended to swim back to C-17 with red eyes and said to herself, the debt will be cleared, forever. The diary is abnormal. Vera is your pseudonym, Charlotte, borrowing Archiang's shoes to exchange for seals. The whole ship's pupils shrank from deathly silence and then roared and collapsed. The fat rich businessman's eyes bulged and his belly trembled before he knelt down and his wax face trembled. His fat lips worshipped and shouted, monitoring to himself red-eyed Joe. The anti-corrosion DNA logs are all locked, and the divine brain crushes the fierce rout of the sky. The lady's knees smashed into the pool of blood and she burst into tears and rolled around. The screams turned to worship, leap into the sea and destroy the evidence and roar to pieces. The Luo Shen passage hooks the throat, and the father's murderous regrets bounce into the abyss of despair. The crew members knelt down and worshipped, pushed the door and shouted, outflank in attack. Kiao revealed his motive to sell his wife and daughter to redeem his debt and kill Li to kill Xiao Li. The ghost in his red eyes collapsed. Kiao Zhixia's knees were soft and the gun fell to the ground. Bags under her eyes exploded. Sweat beads burst. Her throat twisted and she leaned back against the instrument. Sparks sprayed out and burned her nose. Her face twitched and she screamed in despair. She revealed herself like a ghost crying, "It's me." Vera's ex-wife, Li, extorted and destroyed the family with a debt of 500 million, and forced me to kill Li with a knife in his chest and cyanide the balcony to silence him, borrowing Archiang's shoes to fake Fu FH, framed Shen towing the deck, changed Xiao Li's short shoes to the cabin, and the third person killed Armands was exposed. Hidden information about alibi selling the ship to redeem the debt, tampering with the ship to avoid the rescue, and the red-eyed soliloquy sequence was perfect. Zhi regretted covering up FH and pretended to save the family. I jumped into the sea and destroyed all my evidence. His legs were weak and he climbed onto the platform. The silver light flashed from his forehead. The thunder whip shone and his pupils shrank to pieces in despair. The steel plate at the top of the wave beast broke its spine and the gears roared. The tombstone stopped knocking. Fu Han smashed his wrist with his gun and sprayed blood in an arc. The crew rushed and roared, and the chains grinned their bones. Outside Jimin, she burst into tears and threw herself at her father, bruised and scratched on his face, with blood marks on his throat, and regretful. Dad revealed that he was defeated, saved the ship and regretted selling his daughter. Mu Xue was burned and stinging, her legs were weak, and she pushed forward and grabbed Luo Xue with tears of admiration. Ms. Luo's magic hook channel. Ye Zhi revealed that he regretted jumping into the sea and destroying it, and crushing the perfect heaven with his wisdom. The corner of Luo Li's lips raised slightly with a murderous look. A lone shadow stood on the bridge with blood arcing and lightning flashing from her windbreaker. The cold light of her flashlight pierced her eyes and broadcast the ice knife stabbing the whole ship. Ye Zhi surrendered and was choked. The traces of the anti-corrosion log were monitored and the ghost in the red eyes was dead. The route is restored. Rescue is approaching. Violators are patrolled and shot. The whole ship roared and worshipped, pushing and kneeling in the blood pool. The fat wealthy businessman twisted his wax face and knelt down, wiped his feet and prostrated, shouting, Luo Shen finally reversed. The fierce self-exposure was defeated and the blood was sealed. The mystery of the footprints of the case is broken. The noble lady rolled around on the blanket, wet herself with tears and worshipped with her eyes wide open, murmuring, the antiseptic hook throat divine brain. It is so refreshing that the whole ship is set on fire, and the red eyes are locked forever. The waves gradually slowed down, the gears and the beasts began to turn, and the mist dispersed and the bitter sea of almonds remained. The blood was drawn. Luo Litong's victory in the Abyss game was as exciting as thunder in the sky, but the red-eyed shadow hall door flashed and whispered, the truth, locked. The confrontation on the stormy night came to an end, the crisis was resolved by a thread, and the ship tipped into the abyss and sublimated. The steel plate of the bridge hums aftershocks, the low roar of the wave beast gradually subsides, the water pours back with blood and pulls on the ankles, the cold tide recedes, the bitter almond fog dissipates, leaving only the scorch marks of burnt glue pungent to the heart. Ye Zhi's knees sink. The instrument wax face is as pale as residual wax, the bags under her eyes are swollen, sweat beads burst out of the embankment and hit the blood pool along the neck, and the iron chain grinds. The wrists and arcs of blood sputtering at the cracks in the wall. Fu Hen smiled sinisterly over his shoulders, suppressed his poisonous eyes, and whispered in admiration, the Luo Shen hook and throat are all locked, and the captain revealed that he sold his wife and daughter to pay for debts and died serially. The route has been restored, and I owe you a life. The crew collided with each other and knelt down, and the sticks fell to the ground with a clang, their waxy faces twisted, and they turned to worship and murmured in worship. The red-eyed ghost Joe collapsed, the anti-corrosion footprint log monitoring brain was crushed, the whole ship was untied. Ye Zhi was bruised on the floor outside the door, her evening dress was torn with blood and tears. She was smashing the iron ladder and grabbing her father's sleeves. She screamed with trembling regret, Dad. I regretted jumping over the sea to destroy the certificate. It was not a murderous intention to save the family and clear the debt, but to sell it to my daughter. Chuan hates Li for extorting 500 million yuan. Regret. Mu Xue's legs were scalded, swollen and soft, and she stepped on the blood pool with her bare feet, which was biting cold. She shed tears of admiration and scratched Luo Lifeng's sleeves, relying on whispers. Miss Luo finally struck with lightning, and the god heard the gun, sniffed, anti-corrosion and dug up the U-disc path again. I swear to follow you forever, and the victorious sky will be sublimated. The blood shadow of Luo Li's windbreaker stood tall and lonely. The cold light of the flashlight pierced the needle point of Kiao's pupil, the tip of her nose lightly sniffed the broken leather shoe vines and the anti-corrosion 0.1 Hz indentation. The C-17 cargo hold whispers, Xiao Li's footprints lock you, the Vorasprint matches 99.2%, Vera's ex-wife is not evil, it is your fake Charlotte who borrowed a Cheong's shoe shadow from the deck alibi. The entire ship's broadcast was full of lingering sounds. The tomb bell stopped knocking, and the passenger hall roared and worshipped, kneeling in the blood pool and pushing the film. Goodbye, the fat rich businessman with a trembling belly, waxy face, and twitching, knelt down and wiped his feet, wet the blanket with fat lips and sprayed foam, and saluted and shouted, "Luo Shen radio wins." Qiao Ji's knees are weak and the chains are grinding his bones. He regrets selling his daughter to redeem his debt. His footprints are antiseptic and he changes his shoes. Fu Shenjue reverses the whole ship's life. The noble lady rolled around on the carpet and rolled in tears. The glass pricked her feet and bloodshot eyes turned around and worshipped. Muttered, "The black shadow on the deck of the divine brain U disc is restored and the debt is cleared." It is refreshing to the heart, and the red eyes are pretending to be locked in the abyss forever. The waves slowly turned the steel plate and the gear beast woke up and murmured, the mist dispersed and the sea blood brushed the remaining Chanel pungent. Luo Li swung her pocket and the magnifying glass hummed and closed the bag. The victory of the game of the pupil abyss was first revealed. The dark mist in the passage recedes, the coldness of the snake's belly twists and slows, the lightning whip window flashes, the stars are broken, silver is sprinkled on the iron ladder, and the blood is dry, and the bloodshot sticks on the soles of the feet, dry and cracked, stinging. Mu Xue clings to her sleeves and is burned by the heat, redness, and swelling, and she worships with fear, tears flashing. Her bare feet are cold and the iron steps are slow. Ms. Luo. The escape lurker is held captive by a gun in the cabin. Pushing the cabinet on the bridge and hooking the throat, God defied the sky and won the victory. But Qiao whispered, "Truth lock, the ship tipped into the abyss and the bullets were not used up?" Luo Li sniffed the cracks in the wall, seaweed, broken 0.4 millimeters silver thread and dried blood, and whispered with the cold light of the flashlight, "The aftermath of the trivial matter, escort Qiao's deck to reappear the path lock." Fu Yi followed, all the debt documents and love letters were hooked up. Fu Hen knocked his leather shoes into the blood pool and dragged Qiao wax with an iron chain. His face was twisted and his knees were weak. "You've got a bruised Ye Zhi." She threw up her evening gown, tore it, grabbed her father's arm, and smashed the iron ladder with tears in her eyes. She trembled with regret. "My father cheated on me by betraying his daughter to save my family, and the fake FH shoes were framed by my father." The secret video revealed the inside story of the love triangle. He confessed to Miss Luo on the deck, and he regretted that Li was teasing and pushing Vera's red eyelids. The afterglow of the wind and rain on the deck, the waves humming and splashing on the side, the salt needles' icy cheeks, the stormy night turns to clouds and slowly disperses the starry mist, the sea blood-brushed vine shoe prints sink for centimeters, the arc diameter is narrow, the center of gravity is to the left, the center is short, 1.7 m, the body is dragged backwards, the heel deviation is 0.5 nautical miles, the traces of fake rain are still there, the left heel of Aldo Rossi size 42 is cracked. 0.6 centimeters is glued, the seaweed is shattered, and the thunder light after image is still there. Qiao Zhixia's iron chain scraped her wrists, dripping with blood, and hit the deck. Her waxy face was pale and her knees were weak. She was dragged to the center. Bags under her eyes burst with sweat. Her throat was twisted and twisted. She screamed in despair like a ghost. "Luo Li, you are completely brain dead." To repay the debt of 500 million yuan for his daughter Ye Zhi, Li blackmailed and passed on Vera's ex-wife. Destroyed my home, forced me to kill Li with a knife in his chest, pre-cyanide the balcony to silence him, and benefited from the insurance, the Fu Xiaoli twins. Borrowed Archiang's shoes to fake Fu FH, dragged the deck and sprayed anti-corrosion detergent, special glue for the captain's cabin, fake rain to moisten the footprints, and swam back to E45 to exchange for Xiaoli's shortcomings shoes D23, bloodstained pieces, silver thread, mouth killing, the third person killed in the cabin, crushed almonds, and roared, and the passengers rushed to the deck and pushed around the empty space. The fat wealthy businessman, his face twitched, his belly trembled. He knelt on the deck, wet and bloody, and shouted. The deck revealed everything. Ye Zhi killed a woman to pay off her debts. Luo Li changed his shoes and perjured God to cut his throat, and Luo Shen pursued the path to reappear and conquered the sky. The noble lady burst into tears, threw salt needles, hugged her balls, trembled, worshipped and screamed. The antiseptic footprints were washed into the sea in a perfect sequence. The father's love was distorted and regretful, and Luo Shen held back and questioned the inside story and sublimated it. The recording on Mu Xue's mobile phone buzzed with red light, which stung Qiao's pupils. Her legs were soft and scalded, stinging, and she pushed forward to worship her. Tears hit the deck and she grabbed Luo's sleeves. Ms. Luo records a confession. Debts are cleared and the love triangle is locked. She vows to confront God on the deck. Qiao slipped into the abyss. After the storm, the giant beast bit down on Qiao's ankle. The iron chain clanged loudly, and his waxy face twisted and his knees softened. He slid backwards and fell to the edge of the deck, splashing with huge waves and spraying blood. The iron rails bent and creaked, and the seawater poured back into his wrists, sticky and cold, biting his bones. He shouted in despair, "There is also a substitute." Xiao Li Feimore, Vera's red-eyed C-17 button with gold edges scratched is not my shadow, but another dark shadow of Akiangfu's line. The truth is not yet locked. Luo Li's windbreaker. Blood Shadow Lightning leaned over the iron chain and pulled her wrist to question the skater, the inside story of the love triangle. Li pushed Vera on the balcony with her red eyes. Ye Zhi scratched her face and crushed the almond handkerchief. You whispered, "The debt is cleared," through the crack of the video door. The pseudo-Charlotte diary abnormally uploaded shoes. Who is the substitute? Qiao's eyes twitched with sweat beads and her throat choked with regret as she yelled, "Vera hates it." Li destroyed his family and forced him to kill him. Archiang introduced Xiao Li's stand-in to swindle 500 million yuan and knew too much, so I kept silent. But the D-23 balcony key was dropped from the gold-rimmed button with broken seaweed in the cargo hold of C-17. It was Ye Zhi's fake love letter with trembling 0.5 Hz that saved the family and framed him. The other stand-in, the Black Shadow crew member, was a ghost. He regretted betraying his daughter and hiding it. Fu Han put his stick on Qiao's shoulder and knocked his scalp shoes on the deck, eyes flashing with poison and whispering to persuade him to surrender. "Qiao, the documents revealed that you sold the boat without telling your ex-wife." Luo Shen's USB flash drive restored the Black Shadow on the deck and said to himself that the debt was cleared. Surrender. The substitute mystery. Luo Shen continued to hook up. Ye Zhi threw her evening dress in front of her with bruises. Soaked in tears, I grabbed my father's arms and knelt on the deck, repenting and breaking my throat. Dad slipped and fell into the abyss. He concealed the fake FH shoes from his daughter and trapped him in debt. He hated Li Sanjia for playing with him. The video exposed me grabbing my face and crushing my almonds, to persuade me to surrender. The shadow of Akiangfu's line is not his father, but the maintenance man. Ghost? Upon hearing the news, the crew rushed to hit Qiao Wax with clanging sticks, and his face was twisted and the iron chain was grinding to the bone. Blood spurted out. The crowd around the passenger deck witnessed the confession and the roar of worship collapsed. The fat rich businessman, with foam on his lips, knelt down and his face was wet with blood and wax, and his face shivered. Confession of the crew uniform. Luo Shen. Explaining the wrong reasoning, Fu was locked up with smoke bombs, and the whole case of anti-corrosion and shoe replacement was so lax. The lady hit her knees on the deck and the salt needle stung her, and she cried and worshipped. Qiao slipped and pulled him to question the inside story. Shen Nao clarified that Fu was innocent, and psychologically released the whole ship. Luo Li stood up, swung his windbreaker, swung his bloody arc flashlight, and pierced the entire deck with cold light. He broadcast the ice knife piercing the air and whispered to the whole ship, "Wrong reasoning, Fu Han's FH shoes were engraved with smoke bombs, but it was Kiao who was falsely framed by a Cheong Aldo Rossi's vine imprint for centimeters dragging corpses, antiseptic liquid mixed with glue and fake rain in the captain's room to wash the blood, perfect alibi." Li directed a fraudulent insurance of 500 million, and Xiao Li's stand-in was silenced in a series of stories. The debt fake bill blackmailed Vera to death. The love triangle balcony pushed the curtain with red eyes and crushed the handkerchief and locked it completely throat. Kiao Zhixia surrendered and locked up. Within 2 hours of the rescue route to Hawaii, the remaining party members were patrolled and relaxed. The tide turned and they cheered and pushed and knelt on the deck with wet blood to worship. The fat wealthy businessman leaned back against the railing with his belly trembling and his wax face twisted in worship and screamed. Luo Shen explained. "Smoke bomb." Fu Qingqing Kiao revealed that she slipped and caught the secret hook, and her reputation and status were so exciting. The lady rolled on the carpet in tears and murmured with a smile, "Psychological release." God chased the deck to record the confrontation, and the whole ship was loosened and the stars rose. Kiao was dragged off the deck and his face was pale. Before being taken into custody, Kiao whispered in the sinister wind that pierced Luo Li's ears, "God's brain, there is also a substitute, a black shadow C-17 with gold-rimmed buttons and eternal red eyes." Luo Li's pupils shrank and her needle-pointed nose sniffed the lingering fragrance of sea blood. Nair, the feeling of happiness in the lake is slightly rippled. The bloody figure in the windbreaker turns around and stands on the deck. Starlight shines all over her body. Mu Xue grabs her sleeves and worships her with tears. She steps on the deck with her bare feet and relies on. Miss Luo gained the admiration of the whole ship. Her reputation as a genius female detective and her status as a god on the ship are determined. Treasure the U-disc log evidence is locked forever, but Kiao whispers that the substitute is hooked, and vows to continue chasing. Fu Han knocked on his leather shoes, fisted his fists, and saluted with a deep smile. "Luo Shen, I have benefited from the 500 million yuan in insurance, and I owe you the status of cruise ship security consultant for life." The shoe was exposed through Vera's thread, and they colluded to win. Ye Zhi got up bruised. Her evening gown was soaked with tears, and she knelt down in regret. Ms. Luo asked her father when he slipped, and she saved the family by clarifying the false handwriting. The family debt was cleared, and the inside story was revealed. The waves turned and the gears murmured that the cruise ship's ocean dream was awakening. The fresh sea breeze mixed with salt washed away the bitter rotten almonds. The passengers dispersed on the deck, jostled each other, laughed and worshipped Luo Li with their eyes. The fat rich businessman with a waxy face and rosy belly patted the railing and paid homage. The expert on Luo Shen's footprints is famous in Hawaii. The mystery of the closed murder case at sea was solved, and the feeling was so exciting that it will be remembered forever. The noble lady cleared away the tears on the wet carpet and murmured with a smile, "God held the abyss." Unparalleled, the whole ship was relaxed and sublimated in the starry night. Luo Li's windbreaker lifted her nose to smell the cracked sea blood, and she put her flashlight in her pocket and won the game in the abyss. The mobile phone vibrated with a rescue signal nearly 0.5 nautical miles away. The corner of his lips raised slightly with murderous intent and whispered to Mu Xue, "The trivial matters have been dealt with, the U-disc log of the treasure of fame and status has been collected. But the substitute black shadow gold-rimmed button C-17, the red eye lock has not been exhausted, continue to pursue." Mu Xue's burns relieved the redness and swelling. The tingling turns to warm and the admiration grasps the sleeves. "Miss Luo's mind will always be with you." The aftermath of the victory is soothed, and the cruise ship is reborn with new mysteries. Stars sprinkled the deck, rescue lights flashed on the horizon, the crisis was resolved and the world changed. Luo Li's lonely figure stood in the wind, and the aftertaste of the victory was like thunder. The sea breeze pierced through the soaked evening dress like ice needles. Ye Zhi knelt on the deck, clutching the iron railing with trembling bruised arms. Her fingernails made a harsh metal friction sound, and her tears fell on the wet blood drawing, which was mixed with the smell of salt and hit her nose. Her waxy face was distorted, her throat was choked with sobs, and she roared like a ghost crying in the night sky, "Dad, I exposed all my locks, you slipped into the abyss and the god held you, you concealed the truth from your daughter, sold the boat with a debt of 500 million, and hated Li for blackmail." But the C-17 gold-rimmed buttons, the black shadow of Akiangfu's thread are not Dad, but inside ghost substitute Suo Yong. The crew member dragged Qiao Zhixia down to the deck with a clanging iron chain. His knees were weak and his face was pale. The bags under his eyes were swollen and beads of sweat were pouring down his neck. He whispered in Luo Li's ears, "The red eyes are not locked." The passenger circle was empty. Pushing, the fat wealthy businessman's belly trembled, his waxy face twitched. He knelt down and worshipped with his fat lips spraying water. His roar shook the deck gears and whispered, "The Luo Shen deck pulls fierce questions." Qiao Rui roared and serially killed Li Xiaoli, embalmed and changed shoes with smoke bombs, and the whole ship was loosened. But the substitute terrified. The noble lady rolled on the carpet, her feet pricked with blood and stinging from the broken glass. She burst into tears with her eyes wide open and worshipped and screamed, "God's brain clarifies Fu's innocence, the confession of the debt triangle is heart-wrenching." C-17's shadow whispers, "The nightmare continues?" Mu Xue stepped on the deck with her bare feet and it was freezing cold. Her legs were scalded, red and swollen, and she clung to Luo Lifeng's sleeves. Tears of admiration flickered and shed blood. Her mobile phone recorded red lights buzzing, and the residual heat steamed her nose. She whispered and trembled with a dry throat, "Miss Luo. The rescue lights are approaching 0.5 nautical miles." Qiao Suochia surrendered. The whole ship cheered, but the substitute C-17 Phnom Penh button C was whispered. "The algae is broken and sticky," and the shadow with red eyes whispers, "The debt is cleared and the mouth is wiped out, and it is not my father's voice, it is the ghost work in a Chiangfu's line. I swear to follow the gods to chase, and the hook is not settled." The bloody shadow of Luo Li in the windbreaker stood alone, the tip of his nose sniffed the sea blood, dried cracked almonds and bitter rot, the cold light of the flashlight pierced the starlight and scattered silver on the deck, the abyss of the eyes was slightly rippled, and the aftermath of the refreshing lake in the heart was depressing and strange. The corners of her lips raised slightly, and she whispered like a tomb bell tapping her heart, "It's trivial." The C-17 cargo hold button was scratched, D-23 balcony key dropped 0.4 millimeters of seaweed glue, Vera's red eyes pretended to be innocent, Archiang's maintenance sign log was abnormal, and she borrowed shoes as an informant. The mole substituted for the throat, and the root was reappeared before the rescue, and the final lock was knocked. Fu Han's leather shoes knocked. On the wet deck, the poison in his eyes subsided and he turned to salute, fist, and a deep smile, "Luo Shen, the insurance benefits will clear my debt to you as a lifelong security consultant," and I forced Joe to expose himself, but the C-17 shadow husband line, combined attack to continue the hook? The tombstone broadcast on the whole ship stopped, the waves turned flat, the cruise ship woke up, the gear beast whispered, and the sea-level rescue lights flashed and approached like a hound's red eyes biting the bone. The passage is cold and twisted, the black mist is receding and the tide still has burnt glue marks that sting the lungs, and the iron ladder is slippery, cracked and bloody, sticky, and stringy on the soles of the feet. Luo Li swung her pocket and the magnifying glass buzzed, Her phone vibrated and the rescue signal was approaching. The cold light of the flashlight pierced the silver thread in the wall and dried 0.4 millimeters of blood. She sniffed the broken seaweed and whispered to Mu Xue, "Follow me." The gold-rimmed buttons of the C-17 cargo compartment are not Qiao's disguise, but Vera is escaping. D-23 dropped. Qiang borrowed the key and tampered with it. The ink was wet within half an hour. The black shadow was short and fat, not Xiao Li. The ghost whispered, "Xiao Li's footprints lock you," and the vorasprint matched Vera's heart. The redness and swelling turned from steaming heat to whispering. Ms. Luo has a premonition. The poisonous almond and Chanel fog in the cargo hold is connected, and the new evidence is sworn to hook the devil. But a black shadow jumps into the sea, a fake corpse, and the red eyes are locked in a dream. The lingering sound of the roar in the passenger hall, the fat rich businessman with a waxy face and a rosy belly, patted the railing and chased the shadow roar, the submersible cargo hold of the Luoshen passage. The stand-in mystery hook is worshipped by the whole ship, and the footprint expert is famous in Hawaii. It's so cool. The lady with tear-stained makeup and a smile muttered as she tidied up the wet carpet, "God is chasing the C-17 button." The psychological release bomb is sublimated, and the new suspense is heart-gnawing. The iron door of C-17 in the cargo hold creaked and cracked open, seawater poured in and bloodshot bones pulled at the ankles, which were cold and bitten the bones. The bitter almond mist dispersed and the burning glue stung the lungs. Broken seaweed in the corner and 0.4 millimeters sticky gold-edged buttons flashed with lightning after images. The key to the D-23 balcony dropped and the brushed silver thread mixed with dried blood and Chanel No. 5 was pungent. Luo Li leaned over and stabbed the button with the cold light of the flashlight, scratching it 0.2 centimeters deep. She sniffed the antiseptic 0.1 Hz indentation lining with her nose and tore the vines into pieces. She shrank her pupils and whispered. Vera's red-eyed curtain shadow pushed the balcony of Li. It was not murder but hate to explode the triangle. The button fell and escaped. D-23 borrowed Qiang's key. Qiang repaired the husband's line. The pseudo-Charlotte in the ghost sign diary. The short and fat double in the shadow is not Xiao Li, but another brother of Li who cheated and silenced her. Whispering vorasprint. Vera's fake handwriting trembled at 0.3 Hz. The crew members outside the door surrounded her with clanging sticks. Fu Han pressed his shoulders with a dark smile and dragged Vera with an iron chain. Her evening dress tore the curtain of red eyes and turned around in a flash. Chanel. Wu followed the blood of the sea, and his throat twisted and screamed in despair. Luo Li. His brain is locked. He hates Li for destroying his family and extorting 500 million debts. A Qiangfu introduces the stand-in Xiao Li's brother and the twins to cheat on bail. The C-17 poisonous fog whispers and approaches, crushing the handkerchief, not killing, but threatening to expose the triangle. Ye Zhi scratches the face. The gold-rimmed button escapes. The inner ghost is not I am the third person killed by Qiang's shadow in the cabin. Ye Zhi threw herself into the cargo hold with bruises and her evening gown was soaked with tears. She smashed the iron door and grabbed Vera's arm and shouted regretfully, "The red eyes of my love rival." The video showed the balcony pushing the curtain and crushing the almonds. "You are so angry that you forced your father to kill Li. I saved the family and framed him with my fake handwriting. Qiang's husband is a ghost in the shadow, and he is full of regrets." The red light on Mu Xue's cell phone was buzzing and the recording stung Vera's pupils. She pushed forward with weak legs and worshipped her. Tears hit the pool of blood and she grabbed Luo's sleeves. Ms. Luo recorded Vera's confession. The button path locks Qiang's inner ghost. Chanel's poisonous mist whispers all the hooks. I swear to follow the gods to confront the cargo hold. Passengers heard the news and rushed to the cargo hold to push the circle to empty, and the fat rich businessman's belly trembled and his waxy face twitched. The wet and bloody admiration shouted. C-17 revealed the inside story of the triangle. Vera was so angry that she threatened to kill him. Aqiang's black shadow silenced the stand-in god and cut his throat, and Luo Shen's reappearance path beat the sky. The lady hugged and rolled down the aisle, tears bursting from the glass. Her feet pricked, her feet turned round, and she worshipped and screamed. The gold-rimmed buttons fell off and the seaweed glue stuck to them in a perfect sequence. Red Eyes pretending to regret, who? God pulled the interrogation inside story and sublimated it. Luo Li's windbreaker and blood shadow lightning leaned over the iron chain and grabbed Vera's wrist to hold onto the interrogation skate. The log is abnormal. Aqiang borrowed Aldo Rossi's shoes with size 42 vines. The black shadow of the husband's line C-17 whispered, the debt is cleared and the footprints are locked on you, and Xiao Li's cabin chest knife was shouted. Who? Vera's eyes twitched, sweat dripped from her throat, and she shouted regretfully. Aqiang concealed the secret of the mole, borrowed the key, and pretended to be Charlotte, and introduced the Li twins to defraud and knew too much. I hate that Li pushed the curtain and threatened with red eyes. But the black shadow leaped into the sea and the fake body was thrown into the sea. It's not the end, but the mole lurked at the bottom of the ship and tampered with the remaining party's activities. The red eyes will always hide the secret. Fu Han pressed his stick on Vera's shoulder, knocked her scalp and shoes on the pool of blood, and her eyes flashed with poison to persuade her to surrender. Vera, the documents revealed that Aqiang Fu's line concealed the sail of the ship, and the Luo Shen Yu disc was restored. The black shadow in the cargo hold set to clear the debt. Come down, the mysterious Luo Shen continues to hook up. The crew rushed in with sticks and pressed against Vera's waxy face, twisting the iron chain and grinding the bones, blood spurting out. The passenger cargo compartment was empty. Witnessing the confession and roaring tide of worship collapsed and worshipped. The fat rich businessman knelt down with his fat lips sprayed with blood wax, and his face trembled and shouted, confessions in crew uniforms. Luo Shen explained Vera's smoke bomb, and the whole case of Aqiang's inner ghost was released, and it was so exciting. The noble lady smashed her knees on the iron door and the salt needle stung, and she hugged the crowd in tears and worshipped. Vera asked the inside story. Shen Nao clarified the innocence of the red eyes, and psychologically released the whole ship's bombs. Luo Li La Vera stood up in her windbreaker and flicked the blood arc flashlight to cold light pierced the entire cargo hold, broadcasting ice blades pierced the air and whispered to the whole ship. The shadow of Vera's red eyes was locked by mistake. It was Aqiang who repaired the sneakers and borrowed shoes to pretend to be Charlotte. The vines were imprinted for centimeters deep. The stand-in twins, the Li brothers, were silenced after knowing about it. The debt was extorted for 500 million triangles. The balcony was crushed with handkerchiefs and all throats were locked. Vera locked the iron. Aqiang was wanted to lurk at the bottom of the ship, rescued and suppressed Udanghang line to Hawaii. The whole ship relaxed and roared, cheering and pushing and kneeling in the blood pool in the cargo hold to worship. The fat wealthy businessman trembled and leaned back against the door, his waxy face twisted in worship and screamed, Luo Shen broadcasting wins. Vera cleans Aqiang's molestation and exposes the hook. Her reputation and status are so exciting. The noble woman shed tears and rolled around on the carpet, then laughed and murmured, the gods are chasing the cargo hold to record the confrontation, and the whole ship is untied and sublimated in the starry night. The lights of the rescue boat pierced the horizon and the monster roared closer. The roar of the patrol helicopter's rotor shook the steel plate of the deck, and the sea water poured back bloodshot and the receding tide was cold and biting the feet. Qiao Zhixiaweila was dragged onto the deck with iron chains that were grinding her bones. Her waxy face was pale and her knees were weak. She lowered her head and screamed in regret. Patrollers locked the boat with sticks and guns and escorted the boat away. Passengers pushed and worshipped the iron locks. She turned around and stood upright on the deck under the starry sky. Mu Xue grabbed her sleeves and admired her with tears streaming down her face. She stepped on the dried blood with her bare feet and said, "Ms. Luo gained the best judgment on the whole ship. The legendary genius female detective on the cruise ship is famous. The treasures you disk logs and evidence recordings are all locked. There are still ghosts in the growing hook. The black shadow on the bottom of Aqiang's ship is still locked. The red eyes are locked. I swear to continue to pursue new mysteries." Fu Han leather shoes. He knelt down and saluted the fist. "Luo Shen, lifelong security consultants share the victory, and the insurance debt of 500 million is cleared, but Aqiang's internal ghost route usurped the remaining party and conspired to continue the case in Hawaii." Ye Zhi stood up with bruises, her evening dress was dry and cracked, and she knelt down to thank Luo. God decisively clarified the false handwriting to save the father and daughter, and the family repented and the inside story was revealed. The growth bullet sublimated. The waves of the cruise ship Ocean Dream are waking up and humming, the sea breeze is fresh and the salty smell is washing away the almond rot, the passengers are laughing on the deck and chasing the lonely figure of Luo Li with adoring eyes. The fat rich businessman with waxy face and rosy belly slaps the railing and shouts, "Luo Shen's footprint lock murderer is famous all over the world." The mystery of the murder case is solved and the sense of satisfaction will be remembered forever in the sky, and the psychological thriller of the sea adventure is reversed. The lady adjusted her makeup and smiled with tears turning to pearls and murmured, "God pulled the abyss to question. The status is unparalleled. The whole ship is reborn and the stars are rising." Luo Li sniffed the sea breeze, and the mobile phone rescue confirmed that Aqiang was wanted. Intelligent smoke bombs reversed the debt triangle and exploded, growing from microscopic shoe prints to the brain of the whole ship. The reputation, status, treasures and evidence were collected forever. But Aqiang's black shadow was 0.2 centimeters deep in the metal needle mark on the bottom of the ship, and his red eyes whispered, "Lock forever," and his vorasprint remained. Mu Xue's burns were completely healed, redness and swelling turned to fans, and she burst into tears of admiration. "Luo Xiao. Sister has grown up divinely. The refreshing aftertaste soothes the lungs, and the cruise ship is reborn and a new murder is committed." The rescue boat's huge waves splashed on the deck, and the patrol lights engulfed the shadow of the cruise ship. The lights in Hawaii's harbor were bright and dazzling. The tomb clock of the cruise ship docked stopped. Passengers disembarked and pushed and worshipped Luo Li. The media flashed and exploded with wax faces and distorted worship. Expert on the Ros Hen cruise murder case and footprints. Kia Whaler is wanted for locking up Iron Aqiang, and the closure of the sea is breaking the headlines. She whispered to Mu Xue, "The new chapter, the dark shadows on the bottom of the ship are scanning and shadows are flashing, and the red eyes are locked forever, continue to pursue." Mu Xue leaned on her sleeves and smiled with tears flashing, "Always follow your mind, adventure is new." The waves of the distant sea murmured, the hidden black shadows floated and the gold-rimmed buttons flashed, and the suspense was not exhausted. Mu Xue gasped, and the fat wealthy businessman rubbed his eyes and murmured, "A love triangle? Are Vera's gifts of shoes scary?" The noble lady sat on her knees and screamed, "Ye Zhi concealed the murderer's love rival, it's over." Luo Li snorted coldly, grabbed Ye Zhi's chin and looked at her, "Vera's shoe size? Have you smelled the Chanel scent in the corridor?" Ye Zhi shivered a little. "Head, number 42, the same as Fu Han. But she has the key to the hole, the maintenance lover." The taunt started, and the passengers shouted. The little girl forced a confession, "Amazing skill. Ye Zhi has done it, Vera is the murderer." Luo Li let go, Ye Zhi went limp and cried, and the crew members around them looked in fear, as if they were seeing a living Hell King.